Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Talking Seahawks with the Hawks Nest. Welcome to the B&B Report. And we are here once again to talk about the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, where imagine how bad it would be if we had actually hired Ed Donatel last offseason.
That's right.
And yeah, we got some bad news, unfortunately. This time the season is over. The season is coming
Comes
to
to
an
an
end.
end.
Yep, came to an end 3 days ago, Saturday afternoon, and once again we head into the off season here, but the attitude, the feeling, the general mentality of this fan base has got to be better than it's been in at least a few years when the season end comes around. And we're definitely going to dissect that as well, but we also have to dissect what happened in this pretty interesting game. Got to try to learn what we can from it. And to do so, I will be joined by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm doing good. Bummed the season's done, but like you said, at the end of the day, you have the perspective of knowing you are in as an exciting a place, dynamic place as an organization, franchises you've been in a lot of years. So that's the most encouraging takeaway I think you come away from. But it does suck to lose to the Niners for a third straight time.
Right, right. And we're going to try to balance it, right? Like there's nothing good about losing to a team 3 times in 1 year. Pretty decisively all 3 times, I might say. You were not really it was competitive for maybe a combined 30 to 40 minutes across the entire 180 minutes you played them this year. That's not fun. But what is coming could definitely be fun in the coming couple of years here. So we're going to break it all down. And I think we're just going to dive right into talking about this game. And as the stream goes on, we may kind of use the game as a launch pad to segue into what could be coming next, what we hope comes next. And we'll just go from there. So big picture, just like trying to get a overall sense of how you felt coming out of that game. What are you feeling?
Well, it certainly is, as you said, with this, we balance it to go. Look, I feel overall enthused about this team and where it's going, certainly, and I think the future is absolutely bright. If we're looking at just from a standpoint of on the game basis alone, sort of absent looking at it beyond what it is as a game, I'd probably had like 8 or 9 keys. I knew that with this Niner team being more talented as they were, that you were going to have to check boxes all the way down on those keys. It wasn't a matter of just here's 1 or 2 things you do and you'll win, like maybe normal opponents. I don't think that we got, but maybe like one of the 8 or 9 really checked off. But at the lead of it for me in this game coming into a little bit was a little bit of a boy. You sure didn't feel like from the standpoint of at least defensively speaking, you really tried to take it to the Niners offense. And as you see this defense failing in this game as they did, to the tune of only causing 1 punt on the day, drive after drive, big plays, running, throwing, everything in between. I come back to it and I go, boy, you lost with a lot of too high safeties. You lost with a lot of we're just going to try to stay back here and doing what we do, and you didn't bring anything from a pressure based standpoint because it's just, I guess, against your DNA to do so. And disappointing for me because you had to kind of manufacture something against this Niner team if you're going to come away with this win. And instead, the coaching staff just sort of said, well, we'll just trust in the talent and hope good happens. And if it does, no, well. And that's, I feel like, fine. Okay. That's the standpoint maybe operate from, but would have liked to have seen a little bit more of an attempt to try to do something to overcome the tide a little bit on this one.
Yeah, the way the game played out, it almost felt like we thought we were the better team and we were just trying to protect that,
Yeah.
not trying to attack a team that we knew was better than us. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you have to. I'm not saying they had to blitz like 24/7, Brendan, but I mean, we probably could count on our hand the number of times we really had any kind of blitzes in this game. And it's not even about blitzing sometimes. It's just about bringing a stacked front up there and showing Brock Purdy that front, like, hey, this might be coming. You got to be aware of this. And instead, he was really, I felt comfortable in that pocket, knowing that all he was going to have to evade and escape around was going to be those front 4 rushers coming his way all day. And he's equipped to do so. I just it's to me, if you knew that they were going to kind of be better than you on, like, they're in their window. It's not any bad thing that they're better than us and we're talented. It's not the worst thing. But again, you know this going into the game. So as a coaching staff with that house money, what do you have to lose by throwing some things on the line and letting it go? And yeah, that was kind of the frustrating part for me. It was a little bit of that conservative aspect where you want to take a little bit more of the temperature of the room, in my opinion, Brendan.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about some of the positives in this game first. Let's just lead with a little bit of positivity here because I was pretty happy with one side of the ball in this game.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
I felt like that offense. I'm not maybe it wasn't their best game of the year, but you're playing the Niners. They've got the best defense in the league,
Hmm.
and you're finding ways to generate points.
Yeah.
One of the touchdowns was in garbage time, so whatever, but so was the interception. So at the end of the day, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, you found a way to get 17 points in the first half, and you were moving down the field looking to make it 24 points when, the fumble that shook the world happened.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this game and I'm looking at this offense, and I've got a lot of positivity about it because I think Waldron called a really good game overall. I was really happy with the way Waldron called the game. We finally saw a 9 route to Metcalf, which has not been coming easy this year.
Yeah.
We saw that 3rd and 12 where he actually manages to get Metcalf the ball in a place where he can go quickly run for the first down. The 3rd and 8 draw should have worked, absolutely should have worked, and Blythe completely blew it. So even that wasn't a bad call. Like, this game made me feel really good about the future with Shane Waldron, and if there is a future with Geno Smith, him too.
Yes, I agree with all that. I think that everything I look at on the offensive side of the ball, and this is even I don't know if you've probably heard some of the same things. Just it's a smaller contingent, but there's certainly that contingent out there that wasn't as happy with that side of the ball, specifically the quarterback position. But I was all the way around pretty enthused by what happened. You started out pretty. I thought this is where they showed a good transition in this was Brendan, where you started out conservatively offensively, 2 3 and outs, especially that first drive, run first down, second down, run. And then, bam, you got back into more of a purified Waldron like thing that we've seen earlier on this year, where it's more passing on first down, up tempo, a little more varied attack all across the board. I thought that they did a good job in this game, Brendan, of you couldn't be in the situation you had been in the first 2 games, which were those 3rd and 8s and those 3rd and 11s, because that's when that San Francisco fast rush is going to get to you, because you have to hold on to the ball as a quarterback and let those long developing routes occur. And today, in that game, instead, even though you weren't getting a lot of yards running the ball, you were at least getting those 3 yards in a cloud of dust type runs. You were at least getting yourself some completions for 3 yards on first down, and then a run for 3 yards, and getting yourself into those 3rd and shorts, which then allowed you to, at that point, get a little bit of easier first downs, keep the chains moving, and keep the drives, kind of sustained, as you said, until, things ran amok as you were getting down the field on that fumble, with Geno, where you had Fuller go out of you had Blythe go out of the game. And I was doing the live stream at the time. I'm like, okay, Blythe's coming in here. Pass protection is his issue. It was like, as on cue, like a drummer after a joke, Brendan, where they go to, like Fuller literally, is that the words left my lips. He's giving up the pass pro fumble on the play, on the quick pressure on it. But I really can't pick anything apart in this offense, even with Geno, in my opinion. Brendan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, in the respect of, I felt like he got into a little bit of feeling that Superman mode, like we saw Russell did at times in 2020, where I'm scoring these points, but my defense doesn't seem like it's going to get very many stops, and I better get down there and score. And that play in particular, in the fumble, you've got a 3rd and, what is it, 14 or something. You're probably in that moment, if you know you got your defense to be trusted somewhat there, you probably just go, hey, let's run a draw here, or like just have Geno throw a little 7-yard in cutting route to the tight end, take a couple of yards to make it a little bit easier field goal, take the field goal, and let's just try to get this on down the game. Instead, there was a little bit, from my standpoint, the feeling of Geno in that moment is thinking, I got to get this first down. And especially on the interception, this was the case on the next one, where there was the INT, where it felt like, I got to get this first down. We can't punt this ball. Like, defense isn't getting any stops right now. We got to score. What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% what's going on here. He probably feels like it's like that Lions game we played in week 4, where if we punt the ball once, we lose.
Yeah.
We only won that game because we did not punt the ball a single time. We had no turnovers and no punts. And that's literally what it took. Any less than that, you would have lost the game. That was the mentality that I think they had for this game, and I can't fault it. I can't say anything bad about it. Ultimately at the end of the day, we lost by 3 scores. There's no way I'm going to put the whole game on like, oh, if Geno didn't fumble, we would have won and da da da. No, there's something much deeper going on here. Geno Smith, who is not even among the, I would guess, 40 highest paid quarterbacks in the league this year, should not be the guy who has to score a touchdown every time he touches the ball.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point, and I just that's where I myself find myself landing on this. Where I go, I mean, I feel like Brendan, isn't it human nature? If you were a quarter, if you're a quarterback on your team and you're watching the defense, and it's happened over the course of a year. This isn't the first rodeo for Gino, and watching this happen with his defense. Where it's one of those days where we're not getting a stop. It's one of those Carolina like days or Raider like days or Detroit like days, or kind of most of the Saints game type. Just go down the line of the amount of games you've had this year where defensively you're just showing no ability to do much of anything. Feels to me like there's a little bit of human nature that'll be clicking in as an offense there where you're like, well, we got to pick the defense up. We got to, and it's not coming from a selfish place, but just more of a got to try to pick them up. Got to try to overcome a little bit what's going on and what we're seeing happen over there.
Yeah, so I think we're on the same page with Gino. We both think I thought he played really well. I had no real complaints. There was maybe that one throw where he had Metcalf on a 9 route and overthrew him by a little bit. Other than that, I thought he played about as good as you could hope for against a Niners defense that is, I want to reiterate this, the best in football on the road. The conditions weren't as bad as we thought. I will admit that. The conditions ended up being okay. But I think when the game was in the air, when the game was in doubt, I thought he played phenomenally well. I know PFF didn't really agree. I know their score for him was very middling for that game, but I think he did everything he could do pretty much.
I do. I think he was on point. He made throws when he had to. He handled the pocket pressure and climbed the pocket pressure when he had to. He ran when he needed to run. This is the number one defense in the NFL. This isn't some like easy stroll on the Sunday through the park. This is as tough as it gets. And I thought that he navigated that well while the running game was at least fairly consistent, getting 3 yards. That was about all it was going to get. It wasn't getting probably 4 or 5 a lot. So he also wasn't, while the running game wasn't as bad as it's been in some of the bad games this year, it was giving you a little bit. It still wasn't a super dynamic element to the offense. So once again, it does essentially go on to Geno's arm to sort of carry the day, which is not the ideal, which should not be how it is. And if we ever get to go to a Super Bowl place and Geno's ever a quarterback, you're not ever going to be asking him usually to do that, especially hopefully not to do that in the playoffs. I did want to say too, Brendan, really quickly on that 9 route, really got to love Waldron's adjustment there, because you had 2 third and short situations prior to that 9 route where the Niners showed stacked boxes and blitzed, I think, on both of the 2 times, or at least showed the stacked boxes in there. And when they did that, they basically are showing you that you're going to get single coverage on DK in those situations, which, as we know, is a rarity with DK on the outside. And so that's when he chose to take advantage of that 9 route, not simply because, it was there, but because he got a key moment where there wasn't going to be the safety rolling up over the top and he could get it to him. And Waldron hopefully recognizing that with his play calling as well, because when they're bringing the blitz, that means all the rest of the defenders are going to probably play at the sticks right around those the 3-4 yard marker spots to take that stuff away. What remain? What defenders aren't blitzing, of course, that are free. So love that call there on a couple of different levels.
Yeah, I agree. It's a 3rd and short, and it's always scary to take a shot on 3rd and short, but sometimes that's exactly what you need to do for that exact reason.
And you're feeling the defense they're calling. The defense isn't coming out in a 3rd and 3 and going, we'll just drop guys in a zone. Like, they've showed their hand pretty steadily here on what they're doing early on here. Now you counter that. What's your counter to that? And that shows Waldron's, I think, growth as an offensive coordinator there in that moment.
Right. So yeah, Waldron great, Gino great. I would say that K9 did everything he could too. I think that against that defense, getting more than 4 yards a carry when your ankle isn't even 100%, and there was a part of this game where I think he had to actually sit for a little bit.
Yeah.
So he did good. Metcalf, we got to talk about Metcalf because he needed this. Because there's a portion of the fan base that was losing their patience with him a little bit.
Yes.
He went out there and he was our best player, I think.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, he's in the top 2. I got to believe that was one of the best games he's played in his career. Probably the best game he's played all year. Like, that was everything that I think we ever wanted to see from a guy like a DK Metcalf. And it felt so good seeing it happen because, again, I know the fan base is starting to get irritated with some of the stuff with him disappearing in some games, with his, emotions getting the better of him sometimes. So that felt really good to see.
It did, and Spurs, especially from my standpoint, being a pretty ardent defender of DK, for the folks that do kind of get twisted up in him a little bit, where I go, you guys, it's he's not a problem for this team right now. I'm not saying he's perfect or that there isn't some issues there that sometimes pop up that can be problematic. But when we talk about the main issues with this team and what needs to be fixed, and he's part of right now the solution for us and what he's providing. And I believe, what did he tie a playoff record for most 30, 40-yard plus catches now in his couple of playoff
He
games he's played?
One behind Stallworth.
One behind Stallworth all time, and he's played only a handful of games. We talk a lot of this, probably the theme on this show, Brendan's going to be about perspective, right? And knowing where we are and how bright a future we have. I think that sometimes for the people that get a little bit turned on DK, the perspective thing needs to be applied there with him too. He is top 10 all time before turning the age of 25 in receiving yards. He's got this record. He's got a rookie rookie record for the first playoff game he played in. He set a record, I believe, for yardage for a rookie receiver. He's now fourth all-time playoff record for 40-yard plus touchdowns. He's one behind John Stallworth. Like, he's doing this all still at 25, just having turned 25 years old about a month ago. Let's remember he's a young guy, and let's also keep in mind how awesome he's been in total, not just this game, but in total of his career. Played every single game, doesn't get injured, run blocks. I understand that there's things that they want to pick apart a little bit in his game, but it's, to me, feels a little bit nitpicky when you consider all that he brings on the other side of this load versus this little, I get a 15-yard penalty here or there. Oh, okay. Okay, there's a drop. Here he still wasn't top 15. I don't think top even 20 in the sport in drops this year. I tried to look it up and see where his exact spot was, but he's not top 15 at least this year in drops.
Mm-hmm. I looked this up as well. By my count, he had either 5 or 6 drops on the year, which put him, I believe, on one list he was 17th, and I found another list that he was even below that. So the people who think he's like some TO or, remember Daryl Jackson, like it's not true.
Yeah. It's, again, the narrative versus what the reality is. And I think that those moments when there are those drops for him, or there are those, it really stands out for people in their mind, but there's so much on this other side of it. Again, all the great receivers that have ever played in the sport, he is top 10 all time before turning the age of 25 in the amount of yards he's received in that time. And he's done it with 2 different quarterbacks now. Russell didn't make him. Now got a 1,000-yard season with a whole nother quarterback. So we can throw that little narrative out the door, right? Nobody can say that anymore either. I'm going to keep defending the guy, and you're right. It is good to see, because it just gives me more ammunition to be able to say, look what he's doing here. And look, by the way, now we can start to say, Brendan, when we do get into the playoffs, guess who we can count on? Get big play DK is who we can count on. Big game DK, or we got to find some catchy nickname for him, because it's starting to suit that a little bit. We've got these kind of stats that he's shown when he is in the playoffs. So yeah, I really do like that fact here in the game, and I agree with you. I thought he was dominant in this game in many respects.
Mm-hmm. So those are definitely the big highlights on the offense, but there are a couple other things. Lockett, quietly effective. I think he converted like 3 third downs or something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 6 for 39, I think he was.
Yeah, which is, by his standards, it's a little quiet, but again, effective.
He's effective. He's fighting through a leg thing, fighting through the finger thing. He didn't have any drops after that finger thing that I can remember of, which you'd worry about. But so, yeah, you're right. He was steady as well out there, and both those two guys work so well off each other in what they bring as a tandem.
Right. Cade Johnson had a few catches. Good for him. And he's going to be around next year. We already offered him the contract, the futures.
It's good to see. Yeah, he had a good game the previous week too. I think with the Rams, he kind of started to come around a bit too on that one, a couple of catches.
Yeah. There was Colby. Colby had some nice catches out there too. He was our leading tight end in terms of catching balls. He did miss that one block that probably cost us a first down, but after that he settled in. I thought played well.
He's gotten pretty consistent with the blocking too, so I don't worry too much about that with him. That was the worry coming out of college, but it's become way better and improved in the pros.
So the area of concern with this offense in this game would probably be on the line. And, I thought that Lucas played fine. I thought that Cross played all right, other than the 2 penalties, which I don't think those penalties were a huge difference maker in this game. It was that interior that really seemed to get us in this one, and it got us in a few different ways. So, look, my philosophy on Blythe, I don't think Blythe played very well, and Gabe Jackson, I thought Gabe played terrible. Those guys should not be here next year, so it's whatever. There's not much to talk about there. They've been kind of like that all year. They've been bad like that all year, right?
Mhm. Well, and like you just said, hopefully not just by this game, but by the fact that this is also more fitting the type. I mean, Carroll's comments on this give me a little bit of worry, but maybe I think he's just kind of maybe trying to do right by Blythe, for his attempts to go get another job somewhere else. But I mean, this has also been there, like you just said, the performance throughout the year. So fitting to fight, fitting to type, fitting to type, fitting to type. Here's your playoff game, fitting to type. Let's bring him back, huh?
But we got to talk about Damian Lewis here, man, because what happened? What is that? He turns into Michael Myers, wandering up the field slowly because there's nobody to block. Like I don't know what to say about that one, man. That's tough to figure out how he could do that 3 times in one game when you. I don't know if we've had a legal man downfield called on us 3 times the whole season before this.
The whole thing that strikes me as completely weird, and listening to Carol's comments about it being told to them at one. So here's how I've read into this, Brendan, and we'll see if you agree with this. It seems like they were teaching those guys throughout the course of the week to get down the field on these short throws, and specifically the offensive lineman to do it. Because it went on one of them when Lewis was moving downfield, the center Blythe was moving with him. He got called for it, but Blythe was also moving downfield. So my theory on this is that the coaching staff was telling them to try to toe up that line as close as you could, and see if you can make the officials call it in a playoff game, essentially. And what's odd to me is that Carroll told the press conference that this was a point of emphasis from the league around mid-year, saying don't push this line. We're going to be on the lookout for this now. So did you teach it during the week after it had been a point of emphasis mid-year? I'm not saying they did, but the fact that it happens multiple times over like this, what's more likely, Brendan? He got taught it, or that he just had a brain fart 3 times in the biggest game of the season when he's not done that all year long.
Yeah. Or maybe he saw Trent Williams 10 yards down the field on the Debo touchdown.
Oh,
That's
there you
possible
go.
too. He may
Well,
have
that's
seen that.
consistency. You're wanting consistency on both sides, are you?
Yeah. Yeah, but that was a very bizarre sequence, and I think that most Seahawks fans are pretty on board with Damian Lewis after the year he had. Very impressive, very surprising to me. But that was a bizarre and very costly set of penalties there because I think one of them took away a first down that turned into the third down that turned into the fumble.
Yeah, so
The,
you have like a completion there goes from 3rd and 3, which you're at, I think 3rd and 8, but you went to a 3rd and 12 on the penalty. And then so Gino's got to hold a little longer in the pocket then versus a quick little pass or a run play you could have even had if you were just able to take the completion on that one. Sorry to stop you.
yeah, yeah, right. But I was just gonna say, overall, are you feeling good about Damian Lewis at left guard in 2023? I think that's going to be a point of at least a little contention this offseason.
My worries right now in the interior of the offensive line are the lack of athleticism and speed that we have right now going forward, and that includes Damian. And there's times with Damian, he got better this year about coming back across the formation on wham blocks, and he had a few times early in the year he was really laying it. But then there was later times in this year where he was struggling to lay it, and there was times in the second San Francisco game where he tried to run a screen game, and he just could not get out there in space to lay the block and the screen. He's coming through his 3rd year. You can bring him back next year, relatively inexpensive. My given instinct on this is that you probably bring him back. But if there's a door opened up to where a team sees value in him, or where they have an option to maybe move him to right guard instead, and then bring in an athletic left guard, whatever they may want to maybe do with that, I think that they've got to be open to that possibility as well. It's sort of like Gino, right? Where we like him here, but it's not necessarily a fixture point for us to feel like we've got to do. By all means, he's got to stay here, and we got to look at the contract extension. Certainly, Brendan, no contract extension. Right. I don't think we can be doing that. And that might be something on the table this offseason with him.
I mean, he's on the last year of his rookie deal. He played well, but he wasn't Quentin Nelson. He's not a superstar. He's not even really a star. He's a solid player at left guard. I'm not looking to give him a ton of money for being a solid left guard.
Well, and I'm with you. Don't get me wrong. I am with you. My worry is that as we have $50 million to spend, and we've watched this team in the past misspend money, that they look and they start spending it in weird ways like that, where they're like, hey, we're going to give Damian Lewis a 4-year, $35 million deal with $17 million guaranteed. What? No, he's been his consistent starter here for 3 years. Came right in, started for us, doesn't miss a game, bump and a bump and a bump, right? You can already hear all of the same platitudes we've heard before in those kind of situations. And I'm with you. I'm against it. But I also am really fully aware of the fact this team at times has spent its money in some strange fashions over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, but I gotta say, overall happy with him. But that was a very, very bizarre sequence. But like you said, I doubt it's a thing where he doesn't know that rule. He's being coached to do it and hoping he can get away with it. You're probably right.
Yeah, they knew they were up against a tough Niner defense, so they were trying to like push some lines probably a little bit to see if they could get over on it. And like you said, maybe they saw it on the other side with the Niners too, where they saw it, you aren't calling it this way, so tit for tat. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. But I guess it's not. It's only good for the goose.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of that going around lately. Yeah, did you hear the NFL called the Seahawks Rams Week 18 game the worst officiated game of the year?
Yeah, why am I shocked we have the worst officiated game of the year by official declaration? Why hold my heart for a second? Where are my pearls, Brendan, so I can clutch at them in my shock and surprise, in my amazement? Give me,
Well, yeah. Apparently, it was so bad that they're gonna look at the way they do like official training this offseason. And it's kind of come full circle, right? Because it was the Vinny Testaverde play that brought instant replay back to the NFL. So we've come all the way around. Another Seahawk game gets the NFL to finally realize we have a problem here. Let's do something.
See, Brendan,
I like that.
So from you younger folks in the chat, what Brendan just brought about is why you have to understand a guy like me, that's an older guy like this, that's been through this for so many years. And and it's not just 2005 Super Bowl. Like Brendan just said, we had a 97 season where we were going to go to the playoffs. Our team was running hot. Like we're ready to go. And you have a New York team going against a Seattle team. And the New York team is stopped short of the end zone. We're going to get the ball back. Game over. We're right on the pathway to get in the playoffs. Instead, when the ball clearly never gets across the line, like you can see it live, even on lack of HD back then. I'm talking 97 with the fuzzy TVs. And you could see all it was Vinny Testaverde's big fat head that got across, but the ball's down here. And it's like, we're so bad in our history, Brendan. We've had so many bad calls in our history that we have famous calls that are like the same kind of plays. Like you have the Testaverde play where he's trying to carry it to get in the end zone and short, and it's only his big head. And then who's the next biggest headed stupid sucker out there that's existed at the quarterback position over the last 20 years? If I asked you for the quarterback position, Ben Roethlisberger, right? We're talking two of the biggest freaking gargantuan plus size head suckers you've ever seen in your life. And what happened in the 05 Super Bowl? He's scrambling out and he gets tackled right before the end zone line. And nobody can even contend this one. He comes back to the sideline. He's mic'd up and he's like, I didn't get in. I didn't get in. I don't think I got in. And we've got two in our history on these big moments that it's just, you go, oh. So now we get to this point for me. I'm 30 years deep in this. I'm just like, with a cigarette, like, yeah, huh? Okay, sure. Another one, huh? Oh, our game was the worst this year. Oh, that was the one, was it? It wasn't. Why not week 4? Why not week 7? And we had some bad ones this year. I'm not blaming officials, Brendan. I'm not being that guy, but we had some.
Yeah, this year was not fun in that regard. I mean, I think this year stood out to me in particular as just week after week of like, really?
Yeah.
Really? And then we finally get some to go our way, like the Dixon flop in week 18, and everybody loses their mind. That's the thing that's kind of annoying me.
Yeah. Oh, me too. It's like we finally get one after 9 games of nothing. And like, oh, now everybody's like, oh, we got to fix this. Oh, do we now have to fix this? Like, okay, thank you. But
hopefully they fix it,
Look, the NFL, it's one of two things at this point, Brendan. The NFL either has way too much subjectivity and they're not training these guys properly, or there is some dirty shenanigans taking place in the background on the other side of it. And it really doesn't matter for me which it is, but it does matter to me that the NFL is going to need to start recognizing that they need to correct this, because it's getting more hard-lined in. I'm sure you're seeing it more and more in your comment section than ever, rigged. And it just can't be good for these sports that this is where people are starting to go, where they're starting to feel as almost it just goes out saying this being, manipulated. It's not just our fan base saying it, but other fan bases. And I'll be optimistic on this one. I'll be a little babe in the woods in this one, Brendan, and say, I hope it's just a lack of training and that they just need to put these guys on full time and get them all on the same page so that this
Mhm.
subjectivity stuff can go away. But the whole 1 week it's this week, next week it's another week. That we're talking about major differences in calls and the way they look at stuff, and you can look at the very same play between two different officiating, and it's different, and just within a week span, within the same week of games.
All right, let's see here. Daniel Bailey, thank you for the $2. Randomly checked post six PFF grade this year, 79. Shaking my head. Yeah, some people in my chat have pointed out that he probably benefited from having two really good guards next to him and also playing in a power rushing attack with somebody like Nick Chubb. And that's probably valid. That probably helps a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely going to, because he's combo blocking against with stud guys to either side of him at that point that can do their job on their own, and making him look like maybe he's doing a little bit better with that. But it is frustrating because you go, gosh sakes, now you're going to put this all together now. But again, too, Seahawks made their bed with this, because if you had just played him at center through his first couple of years and figured out what you had, you would have known whether you had a 79 PFF type center on a yearly basis. And instead you moved him around to guard and, didn't really get your true view of him except for that final year at the true position that he's best at.
Yeah, apparently he had a quote after the year. He sounded very excited about going back to Cleveland. He was like, going back to Cleveland would be a dream come true. Sounded a little more enthusiastic. So I don't think he's coming back to Seattle, but he's on the short list of free agent centers this offseason who are better than, replacement level.
Well, and Cleveland's going to have some weird. I think they're in a weird, like strangely precarious place with their salary cap situation too. So I think that's also with it, because I think they're going to let Clowney go and release him, and then you've got the Watson money kicking in big time now into year 2 of that deal that was fully guaranteed. I'd be interested to see, on top of, they had to give Chubb a deal, they gave Garrett a deal. I'm wondering where they are. Denzel Ward's probably about due to get paid too. I don't know if there's a clear pathway of him necessarily coming back there. They might look at like, hey, we already want to pay Conklin or left tackle, and we're not letting Joel Bitonio go anywhere. That's another one. Bitonio just kills me, man. I wanted him so bad when he came out. See him have the career he's had. It's been like, oh, brutal. But
Tom Cable would have ruined him. It's okay.
Probably. You're right. He probably would have. Boy, he was fun. He was a good player coming out though, but I'll take it back. There ain't a lot of options out there, Brennan. And I'll tell you, the center options in the draft, there's some okay ones, okay to solid, not great, okay to solid. And at Posic's probably okay to solid, and he's ready to go. I don't need to go through rookie speed bumps at that point. There's an argument to be made on that. And I could be okay with that at that point. He's not old. He's about 28 years old, 27 years old.
Kirk Stemmer, thank you for the $2. 50 million isn't much with only 36 guys on the roster. I believe this refers to the current state of our roster going into the offseason. And it's a valid point that a lot of people have brought up, but how many of those spots are going to get filled by guys making minimum or close to minimum money?
Oh, you got 10 picks in the draft. So if all 10 picks make the roster, that's 46 players right there. So to get to the 53, then that means I need just 7 more players. So if they sign 7 free agents with the additional 38.5 million that they have to spend, which would be minus the money off what you have to spend for draft picks, you get the 53 roster. So it looks that way a little bit, but it's also like not that way, because those 10 picks exist and probably 9 of those 10 are going to make the roster. And there you go. Bam, you're all the way up to a big way. So it's not necessarily like the most in the league, Kirk. Like it's not like maybe top, but it still is a tremendous amount, especially within combination of the fact that there's no real like tremendous amount of void money or dead money you're sitting on. You have contracts that you can theoretically rework / get out from under to create even more money too.
Yeah, the problem would be if you franchise tag Geno and have him play on the tag. Then you're in trouble. Which is why if you're going to bring Geno back, you can't just franchise tag him. Some people are suggesting that. I think it's a bad idea. If you're going to keep him, you extend him to a multi-year deal for that reason.
I think I agree with you. And I think if you're franchising tagging him, what you're doing is you're doing at that point with the intention of, just like with Frank Clark, to trade him. And not necessarily to have to get the king's reward, but you're just going to, let's get what value we can in addition to that, but let's keep our control and not lose him for nothing.
Correct. Yeah. So I think I read an article this morning that said our 10 draft picks are going to approximately count 16 million against the
Oh,
cap.
so I did 12 and a half.
Yeah.
I was off by about 4 there. So, okay. So yeah, you'll be at 16, then would be $34 million left, but then you have 34 million. What do you do with Gino? Okay. So let's just say you get Gino into a realistic deal where it's like I've said in the past, you get him down to like, on average, it's around 25, but you get it 16 on that first year of the deal,
Hmm.
meaning it would cost on the cap first year 16. So you have 34 minus 16, which would leave us at, what am I at, Brennan? 34.
Like 20, like
So
20 million left.
so you
Or no,
get,
18 million.
yeah. So you got 18 million left. I've seen that you can already, again, we can get out of Gabe Jackson's contract. We could rework Uchenna Nwosu and add a couple of years to that deal and actually
Hmm.
save money on that. You can move, if you wanted to move Shelby Harris, you could move that deal. If you wanted to move Noah Fant, you could move that deal if there was somebody that wanted to take him. So there's all that. But then as you're bringing back Gino, that's one extra guy in your roster there. So now you've got 46 plus 47 with
Quinn
Gino brought back.
Jefferson.
Yeah, Quinn Jefferson be another one you could release and save some money. But let's just say you don't. 47, you have 47 then on the roster with 20 million to spend. That's including the draft people coming in at that point. So you'd still have Jets Gino coming back in at that point. So then you'd still have $20 million to spend on top of that, to accommodate essentially at that point 6 roster spots.
Right. And it's possible a draft spot will be filled by a guy like a Cade Johnson, who we already have a futures reserve deal on. How much money would
Yeah.
that be? Like less than a million, right?
Right. Bingo. Yeah.
So you're going to see roster spots filled. Maybe a guy like a Greg Island finally gets bumped up to the active roster. He's going to cost less than a million. So it'll work out, guys. Like push comes to shove, you can restructure Lockett's deal or something like that, or extend Lockett or something like that. You can there are things that can be done.
You just guarantee it his deal and put avoidable year at the end, even if you don't want to add on years to his deal because he's like, well, I want to retire. Well, there, boom, that you go to the other side of it. So
Mm-hmm. Michael Santalonza, thank you for the 4.99. I'm 46 and from New Jersey. I was at that game when Vinny scored. Cost Dennis Erickson his job that year. So is
broke
it
my
actually a
little.
good thing then?
Talking to Chad Brown last offseason, Brendan, and it was one of his surprising takes he had. He said Dennis Erickson was an offensive genius. And and this comes from a defensive player. So I don't, it struck me and like, look, Dennis Erickson was a vertical passing guy that really did do some really great things in that respect of things from Miami. And first, I think starting it kind of a little bit of like a pre Mike Leach kind of guy, right? Where Mike Leach, like the opposite, Mike Leach was like built on the short stuff. And Erickson was more on get the ball up the football field kind of guy. Erickson wasn't a bad coach. He was just put in a bad situation where he brought along right at the end of Bering's run here, where he had to kind of deal with that owner that was looking to try to maybe move the team, and that was means that you weren't necessarily going to get all the money coming through, and he did finally get it at the end. Allen was there at the end of Erickson's point, right? And Alex, and then Eric's Alan Paul and paid for the Chad Brown deal to get him in there and everything, but it was almost like Erickson was on that. This is the same thing that the new owner would do with Carroll, which is a new owner comes in and he wants his guy, right? He wants to be a part of the success that he created by hiring that coach. So Erickson was in that, okay, prove yourself. What do you got? Was kind of where Paul on what was it that was with him. And so he had to get in that playoffs. He had been here a couple of years. And look, you could, it was so obvious to me watching my little young heart there, Vinny getting in, that you could just see Vinny had that big, massive cranium, and the officials got like blinded by the cranium, Brendan. I know it sounds like I'm making a joke, but I'm not. It's like they saw the cranium go over the white line and they thought it was the ball. I don't know if like he had kind of a big froey kind of hair. Like if they saw they thought the ball was in his helmet. I don't know what it was, but it was so obvious when you watched it in the moment. It didn't take replay. I didn't need to see the microscopic angle at a slow motion speed to determine the fact he didn't get in. He didn't get in. Everyone could see it. And it was so brutal because you were on that run of like having a couple games of going good, and you had fought your way through that year, and Erickson's job's on the line, and we might, and you had spent the money on Brown the previous offseason to give you a bit of that, not the same old Hawks. Hey, maybe we're going to be in this with some of these guys. And then to have the officials come in and go, it happened again in the same 2005. It was the same feeling in 05 where you're just, We earned our right to be here. We have every right to be here. We didn't slide in the back door of the playoffs. We were the best team in the NFL that year, and you're taking this from us. It was a little bit like the feeling.
All right. But to go back to what you said about the Dennis Erickson, Paul Allen thing, I'm looking at it. If we had gotten in that year, if they don't give Vinny the touchdown, I think we get in and play the Patriots. And Miami, who did get in, got killed in that game. So if we get killed in that game, do you really think Paul Allen's going to hold on to Dennis Erickson because, oh, we made the playoffs, so I got to keep him? No, he's probably going to go out and get Mike Holmgren if he can.
You're right. I mean, it's definitely like I said, I think that this is an instinct in all owners when they come in there. I mean, look at the Walmarts. They got through one. Yes, Hackett deserved to go, but they weren't holding up from their new buying of the Broncos to like, let's wait a little while. No, they're like, get our guy in here, throw all the money at him. And so there is that pull in owners to do that. But again, remember, Brendan, you hadn't had any success here either recently with that team, that Seahawks team. You hadn't had any play. I think that they hadn't been to the playoffs since at that point. I think like it was 87, I believe was the last time that we had got in. It was 87 or 89, one of the two. And so, Allen would have looked at that and went, okay, you got in for the first time. You're getting some traction here. You're getting it. And by the sound of Chad Brown, he had the locker room bought into him. Brown didn't talk of him like, yeah, they brought him in. Like he was really speaking of high reverence of him when I spoke to him last year. So I tend to think that Paul Allen we probably don't have a Mike Holmgren here if you get into that playoffs. He at least gives him one more year, maybe not more than one more year, but he probably would have given him one more year. And we were hot Brendan.
Yeah.
We were hot, man. We were going in that playoff steaming. Like you say, we go in there, we would have been beat. Like I think that year it was pretty opened up overall in the AFC for the most part. There were certainly those great. I think it was no. So I remember, I remember talking about Chad with this. The Broncos won it that year, right? But I think we beat the Broncos twice that year.
Really?
We were right with them or something. Like we were just like in Chad. I remember talking to Chad. He said, I felt pretty confident if we had to take them on, we could have hung with them. So, well, it's who knows which would have gone, but it would have nice been gone in, and it would have changed the course of history in a big way in Seattle. That's for sure.
Well, all right. I just looked it up. We actually lost both games to Denver. The first one was a blowout. The second one we lost by a field goal. Maybe that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Where the game was close.
That's probably what he meant.
Looking at the right thing here. I might be looking at the wrong season. That's possible. Is it 97 or 98?
It's hard as my memory on this says 97, but that's a long time ago. So it's almost, darn near 30 years back now. So it's like, I'm not positive, but that might be right. That definitely could have been right with it.
Yeah, but that's definitely interesting. If Dennis Erickson got fired because the ref missed that call, should he have gotten fired? Is the question that I would ask. If you're going to say if the refs make the right call, you keep him. I wonder if then you start to say like, hey, maybe that was a little unfair.
This is why I look at that as such yes. And again, remember Dennis Erickson's a local kid, right? I think he's Idaho or something like that. He had coached at Washington State. I mean, this is a guy that you would love to have seen be successful in Seattle as a head coach at that time on top of the success. And he was a legitimate coach. He won national title in college on top of that with Miami. It wasn't like he was just a flash in the pan guy that just sort of like, he earned this job. And right, there were other teams and he was hired to be a head coach in the NFL after Seattle. San Francisco hired him at one point to be a head coach. So it's not like there wasn't the respect level out there in him in that respect. No, but that's also I offer Brendan. That's that little thing of why I say I think it's kind of just a golden rule of if there's a new owner comes in, if we're anticipating the Seahawks sell in 2024, I'm going to anticipate that pretty quickly, no matter what's being said as far as from a public relations standpoint, we're going to be getting a new head coach at that point. That's the way that runs, whether it's right or wrong. It's kind of, it's the unfair, but you see it across the board all over the place when owners come in like that.
Taker 610. Thank you for the $5. I think these are two mock drafts here. Okay. MSN has Chicago gets Carter. Houston gets Levis. I haven't seen that one much. Interesting. Arizona gets Will Anderson. Indy gets Bryce Young, and Seattle gets Stroud. Huh. I mean, I'm not against it, but I haven't seen any mocks where Houston takes anyone other than Bryce Young. So that's interesting.
I haven't either. Yeah, that is interesting.
And I don't know. I like Jalen Carter a lot. I don't know if I see him at number 1 overall. Maybe
I don't either. I mean, maybe Brendan, because he's coming from the national title and 2 national titles, and I mean, you talk about a guy like Steve Entman, who was a University of Washington, the best defensive player that's ever played at the University of Washington, and that's saying something. And he went number 1 overall to Indianapolis. And how did he do it? Did on the heels of being a dominant defensive tackle that also was on a national title winning team. So if we look at historically what can draw that to happen, and it is, I still don't buy into that being the case, though, Brendan. I still say that Chicago looks at their situation and says, we got to get our quarterback and offensive line. If we're going defense here, that's not helping the line. That means we're going to wait all the way at the second round before we get to back the offensive line. And guess what? There's a lot of guys in this draft that went back to college specifically at the tackle positions that they need. For instance, you kind of going to have to get while the getting's good in this draft with the tackles, especially in that first round. I have a hard time seeing Chicago just standing pat there and hold Carter and making him the first number 1 overall pick since Big Daddy Wilkerson in like 93. And by the way, with Entman and Big Daddy Wilkerson, did not work out too well for those 2 teams that took a defensive tackle number 1 overall in the
did,
draft. That's why
did
there
Edmund
wasn't.
ever play in the NFL? Didn't he get injured and that was it?
He did. No, he played a little bit. He was dynamic for a hot minute. He looked every bit like what he was going to be dominant. And then it was the AstroTurf, and it was the shredding of the knee, and that game over at that point. Just couldn't come. They didn't. That's when they didn't have Dr. Andrews at that time.
Yeah. Did they? Is Steve Entman the greatest player in Huskies football history? Period, offense or defense? Probably, right?
I think you could probably make a pretty strong case that he's probably the best overall player. I mean, there's some other guys that we could talk about into that realm. Napoleon Kaufman, I think you could make an argument with him. I'm
Is
probably
Warren Moon
missing
there?
Warren Moon. Shoot, I mean Warren Moon maybe. I think Warren Moon, you could say, was even maybe more impactful because Warren Moon took the program off of being on along with Don James, but it was the combo of them taking the program off the kind of medical tent, getting it back into prominence. And then it was that momentum from Moon that eventually got Don James to 1990 that got to the point where you built the team up to a title. Like he was able to refine things down the stretch of things, get the track guys in there. That was his big thing was, he took track guys and made them into football players, including defensive players, just to get, fast. But the Moon thing got them legitimacy with Don James there as far as him helping. You might make the argument that what that catapulted to allow for an Entman and for the title and the Rose Bowls and all that might have been more impactful.
Okay, this other mock draft, Chicago gets Carter, Houston gets Young. That's what I'm mostly seeing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Arizona gets Anderson, makes sense. Indy gets Stroud, makes sense. And Seattle gets Miles Murphy. Well, let's see here. The CBS mock, I think if we get in that spot, we trade down a little bit. I think you could almost say like, okay, who wants Levis? Who wants to trade up with us for Levis? And then you do it. Yeah.
You're 100% right. That I think is your one priority, not priority, but that's what you'd like to do. I think ideally, the more I think about it with Miles Murphy and kind of listening to opinion out there and just tracking a little bit more of the season he had this year and where he's been the last couple of years, a little bit maybe of a lack of development into this year that you were hoping to see, despite there being some solid production. I have a hard time if we go into that scenario, be there, Brendan, of looking at Seattle if they can't trade back and thinking they're going to pass on a quarterback like Levis to go for a guy like Miles Murphy, who there are those questions with. I don't know if they would do that. If Murphy was more in the realm of just a half inch behind Carter, that might be something else. But the more I think about it, he's kind of a little ways behind Carter. And I don't know. I don't know if they could. I'm starting to kind of feel like with Murphy, I'm wondering on that one because it just doesn't feel right at 5 with him. It always felt right with like 9, 10 in the first round if you drop back. But at 5, it just feels like there are going to be another better option there than him at that point. So,
we got to wait for the combine. The combine's going to shuffle things up. Somebody's going to test crazy.
It will. We mentioned this before, the Trayvon Walker example. This time last year, Trayvon Walker was not on any top 5 picks, not top 10 picks. In some mocks, he wasn't even in the top 15. And then the guy eventually got into number 1. The testing is going to factor huge on both ends of the scale here on how it adjusts the thing for pro and negative. So we've got to wait a little bit on that. Great point.
Yeah. It would not shock me if by the time the draft actually came around, the BPA at number 5 was Tyree Wilson, and most people would be really happy about that.
I was just going to say right now, I've in my mock board thinking about this and looking back at Tyree Wilson's game, he's overtaken Miles Murphy as the better prospect for me of the two.
Mhm.
I like the more of the certainty with him and what he brings. Murphy maybe gives me a guy I can take to the inside a little more, and do some of that stuff in the 3-4 as a defensive end that I don't know if Tyree will be as accommodating to do that stuff, but he's just a better prospect.
By the way, several people in the chat actually confirmed that this Vinny Testaverde touchdown season was 1998.
My bad then. Okay.
All right, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, it was a Week 14 game against the Jets. We actually, after that game, won our next two to get ourselves in position to maybe still make the playoffs, but ultimately didn't. We did not beat Denver that year, though. We lost to Denver twice.
How bad?
So, let's see. The first one we lost 16-21, and then the last one we lost by a touchdown.
See, so we were in both games though. That's my point on that. Was like, and his point at the time the same way is like, look, he said we were playing with him. We were in both those two games, and we lost, but they didn't blow us out. And that was that juggernaut like Denver teams that were in the middle of,
they won the Super Bowl that year.
Right. So I mean, like, look at how hot we're playing at the end of that year, right? And then think about the fact you had kept with that. That was the toughest team in the AFC you were eventually going to have to play was Denver. Of that whole crew that year.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact you played them within a touchdown, I'll take my chances at that point with the third run.
Yeah, John Elway always torturing us back then, I guess. It was a little before my time, but I'm sure it was unpleasant.
He ripped my young heart out so many occasions, Brendan. It was just
little off topic here, but we've got a little bit of time. So I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here. There's a movie, it's called Life or Something Like It. Have you ever seen it?
I don't think I have, but I've heard of it.
Angelina Jolie is the star.
Okay.
I'm actually in this movie, although you would never be able to see me unless you get it in Blu-ray and blow it up on a giant screen and go frame by frame during the one of the scenes at the amusement park.
Yeah.
But I'm in the movie, and the idea of the movie, it's a reporter who works in Seattle.
Okay.
And there is a crazy homeless guy who does fortune telling on the sidewalk. And the story is his predictions keep coming true. And the point of the movie is that he predicts that Angelina Jolie's character is going to die at the end of the week, and she has to watch all of his other predictions come true. And she's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm really going to die." But one of his predictions was the score of a Seahawks Broncos game. This in the 90s. He predicted the Seahawks would win by 4 points. And then they show the characters watching the game in a bar, and Seahawks are winning by 4. John Elway's driving down the field. Last play of the game, Denver scores a touchdown, but then they do the instant replay review and they see the receiver stepped out of bounds at the 1, game over. So I was like, hey, that's what it takes for John Elway to not beat us.
That's the only way we were going to stop him is just like that, or his receiver dropped the ball or something like that, because that guy, he had our number. It was just he was that guy who's just always, you play that's just so much more talented at the quarterback position than anybody else. And he could just do the Superman thing that we often talk about quarterbacks doing in this modern age, that there actually is so few guys that can. And he really was, for his time, the Superman out there. And that, you couldn't get him back there. He was just so spry and able to run around and fast and strong, and then could throw it. It felt like the whole football field. It felt like if you asked him to from the 1, he could toss it to the other end zone. Like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, they had the commercials for the Nerf ball that you could throw really, really far. John Elway was they brought him in for the commercial, and he would throw it 110 yards.
Yeah. It just, you can still, it's one of those, there's guys in the 80s. There's not a lot of 80s football footage that you go back and you watch and you go, oh, this stands out, or that stands out, or this guy. You can see Warren Moon's pretty spiral and how tight and unique it is. You can see when you watch Dan Marino, the quick release, that even for if he was in the modern age, that quick release would translate with how it jumped out of his hand. But with John Elway, you can see the power when they say the ball jumps off of his hand. The ball jumped off John Elway's hand when he threw the ball. It just exploded off of his hand, and it really was one of those. You go, oh my gosh, I can. That's special. That's different. That's unique for this time.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Life or Something Like It, don't see it. Terrible movie.
Okay, that was going to be my last question on it, because
it's pretty bad.
I think my stepsister also went down there and did did the extra thing on that movie. Now that I'm thinking about it, because I remember
Yeah,
there was one movie that they were doing extra stuff for. So
yeah.
yeah,
I was like within 150 feet of Angelina Jolie at one point during that day.
was she hot in person, or was it kind of like,
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell.
yeah,
I mean, the scene basically got cut from the movie too. The entire amusement park scene, it's there for like 7 seconds.
oh, brutal.
So what are you
Brutal.
gonna do? I got paid. It's fine.
Yeah. It would have been tough if you were like, they had the camera like sliding past you every time, and you're like, you know what I mean? You're thinking, oh, why are you watching? You're like, no, they cut it.
Mhm.
They cut my
Let's see.
pan.
That happens all the time.
I bet. I bet.
R. Sanchez, thank you for the $5. Who should we look at extending this offseason? I'm assuming by extend he means guys who are under contract
Resign.
anyway, or do you mean resign? That's the question.
Ooh. Because you're right. Maybe his meaning extending there.
Let's kind of do both because I actually
Okay.
think both lists are kind of short.
Yeah, they are. You go first. Let me assemble mine real quick here in my list.
Well, I think you re-sign Gino, and I think you resign Rashad Penny because he's going to be cheap. Resign Blythe if he's willing to come back as like a backup for the minimum because I don't know who else is going to give him work right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Myers, although I'm still really not comfortable with that. I got to be honest here. I know a lot of people love Myers right now. I'm not really on that wagon right now. But other than that, I'm kind of good either way with most of these guys, except for like the restricted guys like Ryan Neal and Mike Jackson, who are going to be easy to keep.
Yeah, and Ryan Neal is a restricted guy for sure.
I'm getting conflicting info on that. Spotrac says he's unrestricted, but Field Goals says he's restricted. In my experience, Spotrac sometimes misses because the guy is so low profile, they just never
Yeah.
update his page.
Okay, so let's operate like he is then restricted. I think all the guys you mentioned are pretty much the only guys. I think Rashad Penny, and honestly, at the head of the line is funny enough on this for me is it's Rashad Penny, it's Geno Smith, Rashad Penny, and then that's just Marquise Goodwin is probably
Goodwin,
my
yeah.
Goodwin would be maybe my third one in there. But then that's about it from all of the rest. I would let, including Jason Myers, walk. I don't want to spend $5.5 million on a kicker. I
Yeah.
just don't want to do it. It's like kind of against my religion. It feels like a sin. So that's probably about all I'm going to do on that as far as the signing goes. Extension.
I mean, I'm letting Puna go. I'm letting Collier go. I'm letting probably Phil Haynes go at this point. He disappointed me a little this year.
Mm-hmm.
Homer can go because he can't stay healthy all of a sudden.
Right. Yeah. If you can't stay healthy as a third down back that's going to have to play 15 snaps a game, then I don't know what to tell you on that. And, Homer showed some things in the preseason, but we need to start bringing backs in here that have an ability to get onto the football field. It's just, and availability is going to have to start to be something that's a little bit more important than it's been in the past, it seems like, with some of these guys.
I mean, you can afford one, which is why I say we can bring back Penny, but you can't have a bunch of guys who can't stay healthy.
Nope.
Nick Bellore. We could bring back Nick Bellore, I guess. He's a special teamer. Like, why not? Yeah,
Nick Bellore. Go ahead, take him back in. That's not going to move my needle one way or another. So I'm okay. He's great on special teams still. So I think he provides you value there. But that would be no one. Justin Coleman. Yeah, everybody else is kind of a no. Maybe Bruce Irvin if he wants to come back as like a fly, but even that I think probably not because you have Alden Robinson coming back and you can
come back as a coach.
He can come back as a coach, player coach. Then you got Tariq Smith coming back too, I think, right? For the kid from last year. So probably even that's not something I do. So only a couple guys for me, just a couple.
I'd bring back Barton on special teams money, but I wouldn't pay him like starter money. If you want starter money, he can go start in the CFL or something.
Well, they're going to give him like they will bring him back, and he's going to get that like the restricted final. He'll make $2.5 million, $3 million next year.
I don't think Cody's restricted because he was a draft pick and he's been on the team the whole time.
But he's into his fourth year.
No, I'm pretty sure this was his. Well, let me count. Yeah, this was his fourth year. So now he's unrestricted.
No, this is his third year. He's going into his fourth year.
Let's see. I remember him playing in the playoff game against Philly and Green Bay. So that's 2019, 2020, 2021, now 2022.
Did he play in Philly?
Yeah, he played in 2019. I remember because I remember watching him in the playoffs and was like, he's our best cover linebacker.
right? Boy, I'm be off on that, but I thought he's only in year 3 here. Let me just double check. Let me make sure.
Yeah, you
Your
you,
brother
you could.
You're
It's
right.
possible.
No, you're
Okay.
right. 4 years. So yeah, he's going in his 5th year. This would make him a free agent. Yeah, I imagine they're going to try to bring him back some way or another. But it'd be great to see a team willing to go. Oh, he's a team that could be smart with Cody is to say let's make him a middle linebacker in a 4-3 defense. That's really what that could
Yeah.
happen if somebody gives him money to be that. And he might be a pretty good middle linebacker, or at least a decent middle linebacker in that realm of things. But as in a 3-4, you know, eh, mm.
You can bring him back as a special teamer. I think he's good on special teams. Like I'm okay with that, but you got to pay him special teams money.
The only thing with this too, though, Brendan, is that there's not a big free agent market from a free agent class standpoint. Number one. Number two,
Mhm.
the draft sucks for middle linebackers at first glance. Eh, Could be a team that could get themselves talked into thinking Cody's a guy that they could bring in on a low cost option at the middle linebacker position as a hedge or as a bridge until they can get to a better point where there's better talent out there and available.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, after the game he just had against San Fran, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of. We'll talk about that more in a minute here, but that was a all timer.
The thing with it is it's just such bad linebacker play and middle linebacker, especially in the league right now. It's really a kind of a low time right now for talent at middle linebacker in the league. There's a couple guys that are really good, and then the rest are like,
Mm.
it's pretty blah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. All right, Chad Hart, thank you for the 4.99. I'm 43 and Super Bowl 40. I remember that game like it was yesterday. 3 of the referees were from Pittsburgh. I remember that Jets game too. Mm.
Yeah, it's I've never had a moment. I've had a lot of games that have pissed me off that because I felt like my first instinct is to say well that was fixed or something, but I've never had a game that's challenged my fandom as far as to remain an NFL fan and to stay with the sport and still keep following it like 2005 did as a Super Bowl. I would fight in any trench. I would die on any hill to my dying day saying that game was fixed and rigged. And there's really no one out there that can show me any sort of tangible. I've put my ear to the wind many a time. I've talked to Pittsburgh fans many a time on this, and there is yet to anybody that can counter. If you want to get into a debate about how that game was fixed and how it uniquely was fixed, and as I've said to you before, Brendan, I know I've told this before. It's that there's been polls that have been run, national polls run, saying what are the all-time in 150 years of sports, right? Going back to when they, had the polo grounds out there in New York. What are the most fixed contests in the whole? Not the Black Sox scandal World Series. That didn't make it, right? That wasn't number one.
Well,
Not
that's
that one.
probably because most people don't know about
Well,
that one.
maybe not, but the fact that still at that time that national poll came out and it was like our game 2005 was the number one nationally. That was the one everybody went to, and this was years. This was like the poll being run, I think, like 9-10 years after the game had been done. It wasn't like right after everything's fresh in their mind. There were many Super Bowls played, but it's still stuck in people's mind because it was so tangible. It was so obvious. I mean, there was no sense of just being kind of like finessing about it. It was just overt as hell and very clear what they were doing. And luckily we got our Super Bowl eventually, but boy, that one was I was bitter for a couple years after that one. I'm not going to lie, Brendan.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. The other thing I remember from that Super Bowl, there are these catchphrases that if you watch enough, like ESPN and sports media in general, become like branded onto your brain. One of which is, Jerome Bettis was from Detroit. My all time favorite was Antonio Gates played basketball in college. Like if you watch any Chargers game from the mid 2000s, you will hear the announcers reference 1,600 times. Antonio Gates was a basketball player in college.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
and
then during
hopefully
that,
if
yeah,
they got
go
the
ahead.
college tape, they can call on too. They get really geeked up, like,
Yeah,
oh, there he is running the little spin move in the paint.
yeah, yeah. So it was Jerome Bettis is from Detroit. It was Antonio Gates played basketball in college. There were a couple others as well, where just announcers just couldn't get enough of it.
Oh yeah, they've got a couple of those. Madden had it with Favre. He had a couple with Favre that he would do. Remember when on his telecast they always say something about Favre was the same thing. He's a gamer or whatever he would say. I forget.
Yeah. I didn't appreciate Madden enough when he was around. I found his commentary at the time obnoxious, but looking back on it, we're never going to have commentary that good again.
Well, and you missed the age too of the guy that did West Coast games for us on with UW. God, I'm forgetting his name right. Jackson, Steve Jackson. This is Steve Jackson. Whoa, Nelly, we got another barn burner today down. His voice as well doing college games on Saturday and was iconic as hell. And there's not been somebody to fill that hole either. In a way, there's some good college announcers, but boy, he was for me still kind of the high water mark, at least on the college, level. Man, I agree with you. I didn't appreciate him as much as in post. You just kind of thought he was a little dithering and kind of, so what are they going to do? He says, boom, he's going to hit him with a hard boom. And you're okay, but he was good. He was good.
Right. So we spent a good amount of time talking about the offense. I think that's the end of the donos. So let's turn the page here and talk about the side of the ball that did not deliver. And I'm going to lead off with it. I said this in the post-game video, and I'm going to say it here again. Talk about an F- performance from this deep coaching staff that was put together this offseason. F-,
Yep.
only because there's no lower grade. I wish I could give them a lower grade.
Yeah.
So, I mean, okay, let's go over the big stuff. 41 points, 500 yards, 1 punt, 0 turnovers. I think 1 sack, 3 QB hits. Like, what did you do right? Who played good on defense? Did anybody play good on the defense? I'm trying to figure it out still.
I mean, I think Uchenna played pretty good for most of the game. He was laying it out on the line. I thought, again, some good, some bad. There's also some tough moments there with him. Probably just about it, I guess. I mean, a little of Irvin here and there, I guess, a flash of. But that's about it.
Yeah. And for every play that Irvin made, he had another play where he gets destroyed in
Yeah.
the run game. So,
Yeah. This is the debate coming out of this game right now, and this will be the debate that goes through the offseason. And this is just a game we're talking about, really not this isn't a discussion about the defense necessarily, but you have to speak about it a little bit, Brendan, in the respect of, is it talent or is it scheme? We have arrived at the chicken or the egg argument here when it comes to this defense as we finish off this year. And there are different camps, as there now seems to always be when it comes to Seahawks situations, two very distinct camps that suddenly exist. And it's sort of like it can't be both. It has to be one or the other. You're either with us or against us, and it's like, well, why can't it be both? I look at Brandon Ayuk on this, Brendan, and I hear in my chat as I'm doing my live stream play-by-play, Tariq's getting burned. And certainly he got burned on the deep ball over the top when he got bit on the run game. Certainly, I'll give you that. But the other ones are all based out of the scheme. He's dropping to either it's cover 3 or what's called cover 3 match. So cover 3 is just you drop purely to the deep half of the field. Cover 3 match is that you run cover 3 until you see your receiver do something different than cover 3, and then you leave it. You match him then on the route, essentially. And so what he's doing there is a cover 3 match. But again, the cover 3 distinct point of this, that I'd ask you this. If I'm asking you to run backwards and first protect deep, but then react short if you see the guy short, but first making sure you're clean over the top, doesn't that put a guy in a bit of a bind to do two things at once at that point, Brendan, when it's already hard enough to cover a guy step for step if you're just trying to stay in his back pocket?
yeah, you might say so. It's like you put him in position to fail. And the thing that really drives me crazy is after that game, Pete had his post-game and postseason presser. I think he even said something like, yeah, we know he's better when you allow him to, play tighter, on these receivers. And I'm like, okay, did you just now realize that? Did you just realize that this very moment and you didn't know it before the game started? Because it sure seems like it.
Yeah. And guess what goes really good with man coverage? Blitzing.
Yeah.
Guess what goes hand in hand with man coverage? Blitz. So you've got the guy on the outside who's best at man coverage. You should be blitzing in this game or running more stack fronts, especially if you're bringing guys up like they're bringing the cover too. So they didn't have Neal down by the line of scrimmage pre-snap, which means that he was a little late arriving to help on the run game when he was coming down to help out. And they're saying it's all about filling gaps, and they weren't filling the right gaps and all that other stuff with it. But when you've got that cover three running and you're running back and folks, remember with this, it's cover three, which means the cornerback's first 6 yards off the play first to start things usually. So he's 6 yards off the wide receiver. Then he's dropping into what they call bail technique, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're bailing backwards, just like an outfielder in baseball. What they teach you in outfield is when the ball's hit off the bat, your first instinct is to go backwards, not forwards. And so you're always then setting your cornerback in a position for all the in-cutting routes, slant routes, drag routes that come back over the middle. They're always going to be a couple steps behind, even when it's a cover three match. You're not just pure cover three where he's going to the deep edge of the zone. And that's where it drives me crazy, Brendan. That's where I come back to, yeah, that is actually schematics. That is actually you now having your player in a position to fail rather than succeed. And it's not just about talent. You can go out there, Brendan, and rejigger up all of the front seven as much as you want this offseason. That cover three thing that just happened there, where Brandon Ayuk had I think 3 catches for 77 yards in this game, all he ran was the in-cutting routes. And they did it to us last year with them. The last time they played it in San Francisco as well with them a couple of times against Tariq and doing the same thing. And it's not Tariq's weakness. It's just simply that's the weakness of the scheme. And it's because you're so predictable. I, as Shanahan, know you're going to run cover three predominantly. You're going to ask your corners to do that. That makes it very easy for me to then attack that. And that's why it looks so simple at times, our defense against some of these offenses, even rudimentary offenses, because coaches know what's coming. You can't have an offensive coach know what's coming and not expect him not to take advantage of that unless you have Hall of Fame elite talent on the other side, which even after this offseason, we're not going to necessarily have that.
You're never going to get that back again. That was a very, very fruitful time to be a Seahawks talent evaluator, and that's not going to come back. And, I listened to some of what Pete said in his post-game and postseason presser, and he said mostly the right things, I think. It was pretty good. He seemed to acknowledge, there seemed to be some acknowledgement on his part of wow, we just got annihilated out there. Mm-hmm. I did something really, really went wrong to allow this to happen. But how is any Seahawks fan supposed to watch that game and come away with any thought in their head other than Pete doesn't have anything like for him to say those things after the game, and then you go back and watch the game and you're like, is he just now learning about football? Did he just learn what football was 3 days ago and he's trying to figure this stuff out and this game was like a learning experience for him? No. And it's like it is definitely something that you can look at and go, we're doomed. As long as Pete's here, this defense will never be great again because of this. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a team you're going to have to get past at some point, right? This Niners team, you play them twice every year. They're going to be a mainstay in the playoffs for a little while here, I think, almost certainly.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have to get past them. And for a while, McVay was the guy who owned Carroll's defense. And now it looks like Shanahan might be headed that way. So,
and we're not even certain that McVay still doesn't own it. He just didn't have the talent this year to make the offense run against our situation. He had Wolford in the first matchup and Baker in the second matchup and no Cooper Kupp and no Allen Robinson. And yes, I think you're on track with this in the respect of my opinion. I'll see if you agree with this, is that, look, we're going to get better this offseason. We're going to spend money. We're going to draft these guys. There will be an injection of talent on this team, which will make you improved. You could make the argument the schedule is going to get a little tougher next year. You can make the argument that maybe the division won't be quite easy to get through with Cardinals and Rams falling off as they did this year. But yes, you'll get better. But do you get to a point of being elite? And this is the question of the day for me, Brendan, because I look at it through, I want to try to go get to a point of aspiring for Super Bowls. Doesn't mean we'll get to it. Doesn't mean that we're going to guarantees because you're trying to get Super Bowls, you're going to get them. But that's the goal. Let's just keep in mind of what the goal is here. And from my standpoint, you can put that talent in here on this team, and we're probably a playoff team next year. But I feel like a smart coach down the line in the playoffs when it matters is going to take the low-hanging fruit that's in front of him. And if it's nothing but a tree of low-hanging fruit in front of him as far as a defensive schematics is concerned, then how do you just simply overcome that with talent? Do you simply overcome that with being the most a top 10 offense then? And then again, as I come back to this time and again, the last question, if Coach Carroll's defense only works when there's elite talent off across the board, what is the value of him as a defensive-minded coach? Mm-hmm. Isn't being a defensive mastermind coach that you get the most out of your players rather than having the players hopefully get the most out of you? Shouldn't it be working the other way?
Once upon a time, it was a little like that. I look at that defense from 2018, and I'm like, yeah, Carroll got a lot out of a little. Mm-hmm. And since then, he's been getting a lot less out of, I would say, more. Like, not all the time, but he's had way more talent than he had in 2018 several times, and he doesn't do anything with it. That 2018 defense is still probably the best defense we've had in the post Legion of Boom era.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, like people say, the talent. I push back and I go, you have third round picks for Sheldon Richardson, Jadeveon Clowney, second round pick for Marquise Blair, third round pick for Cody Barton, first round pick for Jordan Brooks, first round pick for LJ Collier. We got a fifth round pick on Ald Robinson, a second and a third round pick to Daryl Taylor. You're giving money to Uchenna Nwosu now. You're giving money to Quandre Diggs. You're giving money to Jamal Adams. Like you have invested in this. Sometimes the narrative on this, it kind of feels like from people's standpoint, like we've just bare bonesed it on defense here over this year. And they just they stripped it down to the nothing. And now they're just kind of riding on nothing until they get to the end of the season. I'm like, well, it's not kind of the case in how it's been. And yeah, that's poor drafting, but isn't it also poor development? That many failures on that, isn't it a bit of both? Or is it all just Schneider? And it's just, he's the culprit on that, which I just don't buy, I don't buy that at all.
Yeah. It's at the very least, what I can say is the way Pete was talking after that game was over, he kind of sounded like he learned a lesson about how far away he is from that Niners team. It sounded like he was like, okay, it's time for us to spend some money this offseason. It's time for us to really go for it. And I'm hoping that he ends up following through on that. But he felt a little, it seemed like at the very least, he was aware that he had his pants pulled down by Shanahan.
I hope it does.
Man, it happened, didn't it?
It happened. And here's the thing. Pete sometimes has said stuff that hasn't exactly come through to fit with what his words are. See the combine last year talking about, we've been a little, I know I reference it often, but when we said we've been a little arrogant in our ways, our lack of change defensively. It's like, well, Exhibit A, Your Honor, is that you once again, you're not changing your ways. So he said he was going to change the offseason, didn't really, 3-4 to 4-3. You didn't do all, and I know the run fits were probably a little different this year, and the way they attacked from a one gap and a halfing and all that stuff was a little bit differently. But for all intents and purposes, it's the coverage stuff that's killing you right now. A lot of respects on defense. Yes, stopping the run's the big problem too. That's the part that I have a little more faith in, that you get the talent in here, Brendan, and you can clean that up. I think, okay, you get more talent on the front seven, sure, you're going to stop the run. But the passing attack, which has been the big Achilles heel to Carroll's defense really over the past 3 years, isn't going to get fixed with these same simplistic coverages that they're going to run, predictable coverages that they run, vanilla coverages that they run. And that's the part where it's more aggression, all that other stuff that's, you got to apply it across the board. And I hope he learns those lessons. But your point on this is the one that I think the most important point here. You can become a great team, but this is the thing that holds you back from getting back to greatness again, getting back to being an elite. How can you win a Super Bowl if you have on the defensive side of the ball a scheme that's holding you back in that way, Brendan?
You wouldn't think so. You're making it harder on yourself than you need to.
Yeah. Or your offense better be real, real good on the other side of it. And your special teams better be amazing on the other side of it to overcome that then. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's the part of this. It doesn't have to go this way. They can choose a different direction, but they have to first decide, okay, the old way is not working. What we've been doing here before is not working.
Yeah. And just like listening to him talk, you would almost think the mentality was he goes this whole week thinking, okay, we got to get a little crazy against Brock Purdy. We got to blitz him. We got to rush him. We got to do crazy stuff that we haven't done this year. And then you get to the game and you suddenly get scared and you're like, oh, no, I can't do that. Never mind. He's going to throw 80-yard touchdowns if I do that.
Yeah.
So let's just go back. And then after the game, he remembers, oh, yeah, I should have been doing that. I forgot.
Well, isn't this consistent though, Brendan, to with like the Jamal Adams thing? We get Jamal, we're going to blitz. We're going to do all this stuff with the Fangio stuff. We're going to, he got injured. Oh crap. Go back to all the other stuff, like that running back to the safety of the old thing always seems to kind of be sitting there. You feel it in the back of his head. Like, okay, we're going to go do this. And he puts one foot in the pool and he's like, ooh, it's cold. No, I want to go back into the sauna. I want to go back into the warm place, the place where I know what I know in there. And that's what it does feel like, because Brendan, it's the great irony here is like, to your point, you're trying to prevent the 80-yard touchdown. You're trying to prevent the big play. And what do? What have we seen them do throughout this year? What have we seen them do throughout the last couple of years in these situations where you're trying to prevent the big play? Prevent the big play or cause the big play, have the big play occur, give up the big play. But instead of it being 60 yards on a 9 route, Brendan, it's a 13-yard in-cutting route to Deebo Samuel that then he houses up the football field. That's the only difference on it. And that's the math that's not being done at times by the defensive coaches on that this whole Keep it safe, be protective. Don't give up the big play. You're giving up big plays. Brock Purdy averaged 11 yards an attempt in this game. He didn't just dink and dunk it, man. You know?
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're both on the same page there. F minus for Carroll. And you can throw Hurt and Design there as well. Although again, I feel like that's a scapegoat. I'm really not. Some Seahawks fans are really going in on Clint Hurt right now. I'm kind of not. I'm staying away from that one a little bit because I feel like it's pointless.
I do too. It's the word patsy is what comes to mind, and like the bottom line on this is this. You've been through 3 defensive coordinators in 7 years. All 4 defensive coordinator hires by Coach Carroll have come from in-house. All of the last 4 defensive coordinator hires have all come from within house. The thought process here that he's bringing a defensive coordinator who's running his own show, which if you're going to say, I want to fire Hurt, it's because you think he's running his own show. You think Carroll's letting him go and he's then failing. And now Carroll needs to come in and fire him and bring in the right guy who will then run his own show. But this is the trick and the trap that has gotten us into this place the last couple of times. And we really shouldn't allow it to happen here. It's just not the right way to think of it. And again, this isn't even my opinion on this, Brendan. This is the funny part about this with people saying this, because KJ Wright said this throughout the offseason. Richard Sherman said this throughout last offseason. Even Cliff Averill said this throughout last offseason. It's Coach Carroll's defense. He runs the show. He's the vice president of this team. He's the one, again, a guy that has that much control, wants that much control, is not a guy that's a hands-off guy. I'm not saying micromanager, but he's definitely a part of the defense. That's his baby. So to think that Hurt or Norton or Rashad or anybody else is running this in some way on their own, they're getting to run it to somewhat, but they feel the reins on their back. He's back there with the reins doing it, getting the horse going exactly the speed he wants it to go. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah. Once it became clear we were going to lose on Saturday, there was a part of me that was actually maybe a little bit happy that at least it was going to happen like this, where the Niners just go touchdown, 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 touchdown. Because we've all seen these games in recent years where the defense doesn't play well at all, but somehow you look up at the end of the game and it's like, oh, they only scored 23 points somehow. They only scored 26 points, or sometimes they only scored 20 points. We, as bad as the defense played, that's enough for us to maybe win this game. I'm thinking about like the Panthers game in 2018, where I think the Panthers ran for like 250 yards on us, but they kept turning the ball over in the red zone. Like Cam threw it into triple coverage like twice or something like that. I think they had a fumble, and you were able to win that game at the buzzer because of it, when they probably should have piled up like 50 on you. I'm talking about games like that, where you watch the game, the defense sucked, but somehow, some way they find their way through. And so therefore everything's okay.
Yeah.
But after a game like this, 41 points, 500 yards, no turnovers, 1 punt, 1 sack, 3 QB hurries, there's nothing for Pete to do except go, wow, I got my butt kicked.
And it falls in alignment with what you were this year for the most part. Absent those 4 games, that 4-game run you had, that is what you've been for the majority of this season. The Red Rifle beat you down his top 3-4 wide receivers. Matt Stafford beat you down Amon St. Brown, down DeAndre Swift. The Raiders beat you without Waller, without Renfro at home. The Panthers with Sam Darnold and Donta Foreman at running back beat you. And not beat you. I'm talking about, they just like ran your defense, ran it. And yeah, I think that this comes in alignment with that. And Brendan, I think you come out the end of that. And how can you not say, okay, this needs to be wholly, if not changed, then you better inject so much talent into this defense. The requirements are high across the board at this point. It ain't a matter of one guy here or one guy there. You're just this close away. There's a significant amount that needs to be added now.
All right, we got some donos here. Taker 610, thank you for the $2. Hitting the upright should be 2 points. Harder to do.
I kind of like that.
I mean, I think it's Adam Carolla who has this tangent he goes on sometimes about how the uprights need to go up higher. Apparently, if you ever have Adam Carolla over to a watch party, he's like, why don't they make those things higher, man? It doesn't make any sense, because if you go over the upright, it's good. But if the upright was taller, it would hit the upright and be no good. That doesn't make any sense.
It's true. It's true. I think he's also said, if not that, do laser beams or something, I think is what he was saying too, where you could see the
Yeah.
like you could see it go through the laser if it did. And he's got a point on that. That'd be easy enough for NFL to install if they wanted to. Though there doesn't seem there's like that many kicks that go up over, like most of the kicks you can tell pretty good whether they're in or they're out. It's pretty rare that you get the ones that are right on that line that are hard to tell if it goes up over. But I like the 2 points. You could have some interesting situations where you have coaches trying to call if they got a kicker with a little more accuracy, or they feel like it maybe, especially if they're close, Brendan, if they're from like 15 yards out and they could bounce it off of it. I'd be, and especially if you could bounce it, then have it hit 2, then that should be 4 points. So it goes dink, dink, and then that'd be 4 at that point.
Yeah. I mean, the XFL was doing this thing where like you could have a 3-point conversion from the 10-yard line.
Yeah.
I think it was 1-point conversion from the 2, 2-point conversion from the 5, 3-point conversion from the 10. And I thought that was kind of a cool idea. So
I
I'm all
like it.
for it.
I like it. I like it. It opens the game up a little bit. It adds more of those tenseful situations. And I do. The NFL would be smart to kind of maybe open up like that in a way, I think.
Let's see here. Chase Stern, thank you for the $5. Remember in like 2017 when all the commentators wouldn't shut the hell up over how much our defense had changed?
There you go. He's referencing the thing they keep talking about over and over.
I think in 2018, I remember ESPN during Monday Night Football had a graphic that showed like the Super Bowl winning defense, and then they had like Thanos come out and do the snap.
Yeah.
And then like, they would all start disappearing because Sherman was gone, Cam was gone. At that point, Earl was still here, Bobby and KJ were still here, but like Bennett like got snapped, Averill got snapped. It was just showing how much had changed since the team won the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, I remember it. They were reveling a little bit. It sounded like at the time almost with a glee.
Yeah. And again, that defense actually was pretty decent, 11th in the league in scoring.
Yeah, he got a lot out of that defense for sure, especially for where the talent was on it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Dennis McComer, thank you for the $5. If the Bears decided to take Bryce Young at 1 and move on from Justin Fields, would you have any interest? And if so, what would you give up for him? This is a really good question. We should think about this one a little bit because it's not impossible the Bears move on from Fields.
The Bears, I kind of have thought a lot about this one. The base issue with this comes down to the crappy situation that the Bears brought Fields into in making this decision for the Seahawks. And give me a quick second to come around on this. I've long said that when you try to make an evaluation of a quarterback coming into a bad situation where the stage has not been set for him, instead the team is just, let's get a quarterback and that'll solve all of our problems. And that's what they did with Justin Fields. They sort of didn't think he was going to last as long as he did. They jumped. Good on them for jumping, but their team was in a horrible place to be jumping at that moment to do so. The line was not on point. The playmakers were not on point. Nothing was on point. The coaching staff wasn't solidified. I mean, go down the line, and it was really the poor choice all the way through. So now we're at a point now this year where while he runs all over the place and he looks like one of the most dynamic quarterbacks with his legs outside of Lamar Jackson, throwing the ball has been pretty bad, and his throwing numbers are pretty bad. And so now you have to try to unwind out of that. Is it the offensive line? Is it the skill position players? Is it Chase Claypool coming there mid-year and not knowing the routes and running the wrong routes? And then I don't know, Brendan. How do I make that evaluation on that? How do I make that determination on who he is? All I can really do with him at that point is lean back on my evaluation of what he was in college, which I thought he was a solid first-round prospect. I think he's probably still that. I think you're probably going to have to get around some of the arm stuff as far as accuracy goes to a degree, which I don't know how that fits for a West Coast offense that does kind of rely a little bit more on the accuracy angle of things. But what's the cost? I'll give up 20, but I ain't giving up more than 20. That's it.
I feel like,
is it 19 now? If the Bucs
no,
lost,
it's 20. It's 20. I'm nowhere near that. To me, Fields is like the definition of a quarterback who will never, ever play a full season. Like it's even more so than some of these other quarterbacks who are going to struggle to play full seasons. Like I just don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think he fits this offense at all. You would have to reboot your offense around him. And also, the Bears GM is a complete idiot. He gave up basically a first-round pick for Chase Claypool, because that second-round pick he traded ended up being number 32. So clearly he doesn't understand value very well. So I would just offer up like a 4th-round pick and see what happens. I'm not that interested in Fields. I'm not feeling that one.
I'm not really either, and probably I'm wrong even at sitting at 20 with it, to be honest with you, based on kind of what you're saying with it too. You're probably on the right track with it. It's just hard. It's very hard where the evaluation standpoint is for me on him with it because of the fact that there's so much around him that's not working right. And I am very much, you know this about me, a big believer in the quarterback position, and his success is heavily driven by what he has around him in a way that I don't think quarterbacks are always given credit for, or given sometimes room for error for, as far as the explanation for why things are the way they are. But with that said, I think I'd rather, yeah, you're right. You know, he's going a couple of years now into his deal. He's going to get closer and closer and need to get paid, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that. I'm happy with what I have in that instance. It makes a little more sense to talk about to me than like the Lamar idea that I know is gonna get tossed around a little bit, but I still don't like it.
Yeah, I hate the Lamar aspect. I honestly, I would rather do Justin Fields all day than Lamar.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but I I'm not feeling. And by the way, this is another donation he sent just to follow up to the initial one. Thank you again, Dennis, for the $5. PFF guys, we're talking about this, just asking your opinion. Yeah, I like Fields. I want to be clear about that. I'm rooting for him. I think it's cool. I think he's fun. I think the league needs more players like him, but I'm not interested in hitching my wagon to him.
As Dennis, as Brendan said, he's very exciting, but it is that those throw. I can't remember the show I was listening to on a podcast as I was kind of doing my work in the background, because it was kind of one of those background deals. But we're really speaking about the fact that the throwing numbers are just the advanced throwing numbers, all that stuff across the board just aren't great for him. And it's a part that, like, I like the mobility stuff on these modern quarterbacks, but you've got to be able to throw and throw with accuracy, especially when you're running a West Coast offense, which is timing based, short and intermediate routes. You've got to put a ball in a spot. It's got to be precise. There's not as much separation on those routes because they're shorter routes. You can't have a guy like that unless, like Brendan said, you're looking to maybe rebuild a little bit of your. You got to kind of do with Fields like what the Broncos are going to have to do with Wilson at that point, which is then you're like power running game, deep shots over the top. Like, really, that's what you're doing if you're bringing in Fields to me, because he does have a big arm, but I'm not asking him to make those 30, 35 throws a game, short and intermediate. It's going to be run based and build a big lineup around him and go that way with it.
Okay, let's see here. Chad Hart, thank you for the 4.99. Who was Seattle's best coach, Pete Carroll or Chuck Knox?
It's actually a really good question, because Chuck didn't have anywhere near the resources that Pete Carroll has had to operate off of. You know, Chuck had to go out into Pullman, Washington to conduct his training camps. You know, Pete Carroll gets Renton by the water. You know, it's a little bit of a different place as far as what Carroll had to work with than Chuck. But with that said, at the end of the day, Chuck, you know, had a couple of stops in the NFL and never got over the top. Was, you know, really a really, really, you know, great coach, kind of like a Schottenheimer in a lot of ways, Marty Schottenheimer, where, you know, the ending coaching record's great, and a lot of wins and division titles, and even some playoff success, but never getting over the hump. Not with the Rams, not with the Bills, not with the Seahawks. Carroll went on and won a national title with the USC Trojan a couple times over, and then also went here and took us back-to-back Super Bowls. So Carroll is, at the end of the day, the best coach in Seahawks history.
I mean, in terms of result, that is clearly the case, 100%. I don't know. I have more positive feelings about Holmgren as a Seahawks coach than anyone else, though. I feel like he's kind of the guy that, you know, Paul Allen saved the Seahawks, but I feel like he brought in Holmgren to do it. Looking at where we were before Holmgren and looking at where we got with Holmgren, and he gave this franchise a legitimacy that existed well beyond his tenure here.
Sure.
Where after he left, we took a couple years off, of course, but you were right back up at the top very quickly. You won the Super Bowl. You've had this good run. I don't know. I look at Holmgren, and I know Pete's had more success than Holmgren. He's won more playoff games. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to multiple Super Bowls. He's been here longer. But what Holmgren did to turn the organization around, he's going to be the Seahawks coach I feel the most positively about, I think, is how I'll put it.
I think you make a solid argument for that. And let's face it, Holmgren got to 3 Super Bowls, won 1. You know, Pete's been to 2. And when you include the Green Bay time for Holmgren as well. I know he only got to 1 with us, but I think you can make an argument for that. You certainly can. And Holmgren's eventually probably going to get into the Hall of Fame, and Coach Carroll's probably going to eventually get in the Hall of Fame. And as I always say, whether it's players or coaches, when you start trying to parse between Hall of Famers, it's like pulling pulling a sticker off from its backing. It's tight. It's very close at that point usually.
Hmm. Yeah, and I do wonder if you got Holmgren like an elite quarterback here. Like he had a pretty good one, and he made some really good stuff happen with that quarterback. But if you got him, if you got him a quarterback like I know this is now kind of controversial, but like young Wilson, what would he have been able to do with that? If you got him a quarterback, like he had in Green Bay, what would he have been able to do with that?
I think Wilson would have been a nightmare for him,
Mm,
because he would have been wanting to fit him into the confines of what he wanted him to do in the offense, and rather than kind of letting like Carroll let Wilson run free and wild into the open. I do think you're on the right path, though, in the respect of he short sold his quarterback position. Hasselbeck was a solid quarterback, but whose talent was not a difference maker at the position, and that there were times that you maybe needed that a little bit more to lean into for what the West Coast offense, the way that Holmgren ran it, much like Andy Reid, right, and any of those disciples that come off of Bill Walsh, it is very much heavily driven by the quarterback. We talk about our situation here going forward, where even though we run a West Coast offense, in my opinion, it's not the same thing as far as the requirements from the position as it was for what Holmgren's going to want, which is more of the guy to carry the day, more of the cape flapping in the wind, right? Like you got to be that guy. And so if you have a guy that's a little limited, like Hasselbeck was from a standpoint of not mobile and not the greatest arm strength in the book, well, now you're always having to kind of a little slightly, even to a degree, overcome that stuff rather than just find your tried and true guy. And I think that the thing with Holmgren on that he's got to own to a little bit with that, Brendan, is much like with Shanahan, Trey Lance, it's like you did choose Hasselbeck. You did come out of Green Bay and you had all this carte blanche to do what you wanted to do with the quarterback position and tell Allen, like, we need to give up 3 first-round picks to get this guy in the draft. But instead, you tried to get by with less because he was the general manager as in that play. So, he kind of was the one to blame on why he didn't go a little bit stronger. And I bet if he looked in retrospect, he'd say, yeah, I probably could have gotten a little bit more talent at the quarterback position, and that would have helped us out. Maybe in a couple of those years that we topped out at times in the playoffs.
yeah, I mean the Wilson thing, I don't know, because like I look at somebody like Favre. Whenever Favre was under any other coach than Mike Holmgren, he
Mm-hmm.
was wild, he was crazy, he would just randomly lose his mind. Holmgren really managed to keep him on point. I wonder if he could have done that with Wilson in that same way
I
and
just think
gotten him to control himself.
the height limitation stuff. There's so many
Mm,
throws on that you've got to throw blind. And that was really not, and maybe Holmgren would have been more willing to get Wilson to willing to do it. He did it with Young. Remember I told you about it with Young at one point. They asked him on how he made some of these throws where he's got 6 foot, 6'1", maybe probably 6 foot was really what Young was. And he
mhm,
said, he couldn't see over the top. And he said, how do you throw this into Rice at such a pinpoint place? He's like, I throw it blind.
mm,
And it blew me away when he said it, but it made sense. It's like, I'm just throwing to a spot. I'm trusting Jerry to run the route and be there on time and be to where he's supposed to be. And then I'm throwing precisely to a place I want to throw it to. And that's, I've never seen Wilson kind of use that anticipatory throwing ability. So to believe that
yeah,
Holmgren would bring that out, I just think it's kind of not, it's not, Wilson wants to see it. Like, I want to see it open. I want to see it break. I want to be, and part of it's not coming from a bad place. It's coming from care and not wanting to have the ball be intercepted, making sure if I throw this, it's going to be a completed ball. There's no chance this gets picked. But in the West Coast offense, like I was saying, because it's short and intermediate passing, you don't have the separation to see it open. You got to throw it before it gets open. You got to throw it at the stem of the route. You got to get that ball out of your hand. And I don't know, man. I think that would have been a tough pairing between Wilson and Holmgren.
right. All right, let's see here. Daniel Bailey, thank you for the $5. I know how we get a good D again and become contenders. As a fan base, we invest into an inception machine to use on Pete. This is me chipping in. Yeah. I mean, realistically, I think the only way it would happen would be for Pete to do what he did on offense and just say, I'm giving it to somebody else and I'm not going to touch it.
Yep. I agree.
And I will say this playoff game against the Niners was so bad. Maybe that actually motivates him to do something like that. Maybe this is like a moment where he's like, wow, I really can't do this anymore.
Well, it took at the end of the year, it was, remember what the offense and what he said about this was that when they asked him about how the running game got going at the end of last year, and he said it was specifically by the contributions of Waldron and Dickerson, our offensive line coach, and what they were bringing to the table from what they had brought from the Rams over. And so maybe to your point on that, that's where you have a little bit of this hope on this, and that you can get to this place on this because of that yes, that I realized this didn't work last year. I'll do the same thing over here this year and let's go. I hope so, Brendan. And that would be a pathway to having a success. Cause I just think even a new idea, somebody coming in that's not going, no, wait, we don't do that. No, wait, we don't do that. No. That's against one of our rules. That's one of our rules that goes against, because that means that you're risking the big play. Don't do it. I think you get anybody in there, they're going to very quickly go, okay, we got to go this. Here's the clear route with it. Without the reins, without Pete, they're kind of pulling through there. They would go a little bit more unbridled, and that would bring more success with the talent.
Yeah, and I hope it happens. Although there was one thing Pete said in his postseason presser that scared me, scared the crap out of me. He said something that intimated that the Niners have a better roster than the Seahawks, right? He was like, they have better players. And I think he was asked, what players on the Seahawks would you say are on the Niners level?
Yeah.
And he said Jordan Brooks.
Yeah.
Which I kind of feel like that might be him trying to make an excuse. Like he's trying to blame it on the injury. Like, oh, Brooks was out, guys. That wouldn't have happened if Brooks was in there.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's going to be his thing going forward. Like, oh, it's because Brooks was out that happened. That never would have happened if Jordan Brooks was in the game.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not. I bristled at his comment in regards to Brooks too, and he's got his guys that he kind of. This is the thing with Carroll that's driven me crazy a little bit in recent years, and one of the things that I think has caused some of the problems for him, as far as his defense not having as much success, is he's not always putting the best talent out on the football field at any given time. He's got his guys he kind of falls in love with, and he's going to keep trying them until they eventually get there. And Brooks has become one of those guys. And this is in deference to what he did at the start when he walked in here, which was churn, which was moving through the roster, which is nobody's guaranteed anything. I don't care where you were picked. I don't care how high you were picked. You're going to go out there and play if you're the best guy for the job. And this is a little bit of that. This is the stuff that makes me kind of go, I don't think we're in that as much. I don't think competition is king as much. I think people get earmarked positions and starter hoods and all of that stuff. And you just go with it. And that's the part that disappoints me, because this is what brought you to success, was going this route before. Why bail on that? Why not go back to that now that you've lost your way from it? I think it's a little bit of when Richard Sherman mentioned 4 or 5 years ago. I feels like they've kind of lost their way a little bit over there. That's, in my opinion, that specific part rang very true in regards to that, in that the competition doesn't feel as kind of, fierce in that respect of things. And maybe it's there to a degree. Miles Adams was finally able to get his snaps in here, but why is LJ Collier still getting snaps? Why is LJ Collier getting one snap over Miles Adams? Please, somebody, by God, anybody, explain it to me.
Yeah, I think it's because we ran out of people. I don't think Collier would have been playing if we had like Monet.
But he had times this year. He was active in games where Miles Adams was inactive. I guarantee you there were games that there were, and there's no bloody explanation for it whatsoever. Yeah, it's just a game here or a game there, Brendan. I'll give you that. But it's like, why? Adams has flashed way more in the preseason than Collier has in 3 preseasons. But it's because he's a first round pick. You're trying to get value out of it. You're trying to squeeze that blood out of a turnip, and you're not getting anything still. LJ never gave you the good performance, never came about, never happened. Just like Jordan Brooks is never going to get great in coverage as a linebacker. He'll always be one of the worst, if not the worst, coverage linebackers in the sport whenever you trot him out there. Schematic changes aren't going to fix that. It was that way in college. It's been that way with him. And every year that he's been a pro, it's going to be that way into the future. But I guess competition isn't king, because you just kind of earmark. You already hear him talking about it in that way of, he's starting next year once he comes back from ACL. Well, wait, is he going to be 100% from ACL? Is he going to be like Rashad Penny? Well, no, he'll be back. He'll be there. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, between Brooks getting injured and Barton being a free agent, I hope that we're forced to bring in more linebackers this offseason. But
we will.
Hearing the way Pete talked about Brooks, I'm hoping it's just him trying to blame things on injuries, like I said, like not really using any logic, just being like, oh, my defense was terrible because I didn't have this player. I just have to, okay, what player did I not have in this game? Brooks. Okay. I'm going to talk
Yeah.
about Jordan Brooks.
I hope you're right on that. I do hope
Yeah.
you're right on that. And it very well could be the case.
Mm-hmm. A and Drex A, thank you for the $1.99. Thoughts on Dallas versus San Fran? I hate both of them, by the way. Yeah. I actually did a stream of the game last night, watching Tom Brady's execution. Presumably, anyway. I don't know why anyone would want him at this point, but people were kind of torn. Some people wanted Tampa to win so our pick would move up one, but there are a lot of people who were like, I don't really care about that. I just want San Fran to actually have a chance to lose, and Dallas could beat them, and Tampa Bay ain't.
Yeah.
So, interesting game.
It is. Dallas, as I've said for a while, is one of the most unpredictable teams of what you're going to get week in and week out. For the most part, it's been good this year, but when they go bad, they're completely bad, and when they're going good, they're completely good, and it's all cooking along, and it's very hard to catch an in between on them on that. So it's like, how do you predict it? I think they're on a short week. San Francisco's on extra rest. I do think that Dan Quinn, the interesting part of this is what will be interesting about this game is watching Carroll Disciple and Dan Quinn attack a San Francisco defense in a completely different way than how Coach Carroll attacked that San Francisco defense last week. And that you're watching a Disciple, the student, bring on new lessons after he left his head coach, his former head coach, and that those adaptations are going to play that San Francisco offense at the very least, Brendan, tougher. Maybe it's not enough to beat them, but they will play them tougher by the fact that they're going to get Dallas in situations where there is some schematic advantages at times in the course of that game. So I probably still give it to San Francisco, but Dallas will make it a whole lot of a tougher game, I think, than what we did.
Yeah, I feel like the Dallas defense does bring Brock Purdy down to earth. I think it's going to be a back to earth moment for Brock Purdy, but I think the Niners would still win. I think Dak probably gives it back.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Agreed.
20-13 San Fran, something like that.
Something like that sounds about right. Somewhere along those lines, but I do think they'll edge him enough. You're right. Brock's not going to have kind of the day that he had against us against the Dallas, and so it'll keep closer. But that Niners team's rolling and they're feeling good, and they've got their guys healthy, and they're exactly the place you want to be right now, including getting to play at home.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about Carroll and the scheme of this defense. I really just don't feel like we need to say that much about the players, because what chance do the players have? It seems almost, it doesn't seem like it makes sense to really talk that much about these players, except for maybe like Cody Barton tackling his own man.
Yeah.
That was bad.
And like you said, Poona Ford, Quentin Jefferson, maybe Brian Monet, Al Woods. Those guys are all gone after the season, most likely. So, how much to break down? Bruce Irvin, he's going to most likely be gone after the season, and he was fine this year in what he brought. You're looking at it Darrell Taylor didn't do anything, so he completely disappeared from that angle in this game.
He got hurt, right? He ended up only playing like 15 snaps. He got the stinger.
There we go. So,
I was actually bummed out for him because he worked so hard to get here. He's actually been playing pretty well lately. He's at least been positively contributing, and then he gets to the playoffs and he's just immediately.
If we can get a second rounder for him, God, if we can get a second rounder for him, that'd be lovely. If we just talk some team into this, probably can't, but that'd be great if we could, just to kind of open things up and give us that extra pick. Cause it's another one of those guys just kind of frustrating with where it's at, with him. But yeah, there's not a lot else to turn over with it. I mean, Abram maybe here going forward, maybe not. Ryan Neal, maybe not. Well, probably if he's restricted, but Adams will be back here next year. So that's not really anything to turn over with that. Corner standpoint, we'll see how it goes. Neither guy, again, I think the one time Tariq got beat, yes. Mike Jackson had it a couple times given to him on some routes, but no, there wasn't anything bad from them on the outside necessarily as far as them being super picked on or problematic in this game.
Really bad tackling, I'd say, overall. I can't really pinpoint one person.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that tackling thing to me is, again, where we come back to, you have a bend but don't break defense. So you have a defense that gives up a lot of completions on top of the runs that you're going to get naturally that you're going to have to tackle on. You're putting your defense more often than not against other teams, maybe league-wide, in situations of having to tackle, and you can't teach tackling like you once could. No two-a-days, no padded practices. Now it's starting to fail, and you can't do much to really fix that. You can get better tacklers, but you're not going to be able to teach tackling, I don't think, any better, because at the end of the day, the only way to really learn tackling is putting on the pads and popping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just kind of a tough one. It's kind of a weird one because this year overall, I felt like maybe the secondary was not very good tackling, but overall, I didn't think it was terrible. But in this game in particular, it just really didn't show up. I've seen stats that indicate that even in recent years when the defense hasn't been so good, the tackling, we actually miss fewer tackles than most teams. But this year, it felt like as the season went on, especially, things just kept getting worse and worse. And you're right. I think a big part of it is you can't practice as much as you used to.
Yeah, and if you have the rally to the ball defense, if you have a defense, let's say that causes more incompletions because you're blitzing and more of the quarterback throwing it away, or it's less of the slow drives up the football field that are 10, 12, 13 play drives that are all each play requiring tackling, requiring you to get, and you put that in conjunction with the fact you can't teach it, and your type of defense is on brighter display to tackle than a defense like Wink Martindale, right? Who's is going to be more pressure based, that's going to be more like feast or famine-y kind of in their attack style on it. So that's going to lead to then, and I don't think this changes in the future, more missed tackles. I think you also had Jordan Brooks or no Bobby Wagner, no KJ Wright this year, which were two bit that you've had in recent years. And KJ was always a sure tackler along with Bobby, and Jordan was a lot more of a certain tackler last year than he's been this year, where it's really fallen off for him as far as the missed tackles, where that was not the case last year with him. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. And we kind of knew Woolen was going to struggle to tackle it first because he didn't do it very much in college.
Yeah. And sure, like we talked about Sherman, it took Sherman some time to become a really good tackler. When you're making that transition, it does take a while. As long as they show you the flashes, Woolen showed you enough of the flashes in it of willingness to do it that he can do it.
And if we're being honest, I think bad tackling is just kind of a league-wide thing. Like
it is. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, you see how much these players don't want to practice. Like you remember the Broncos thing where they had one padded practice left when Rosberg took over and he decided to utilize it, and the players were like furious because like, our season's over. Why are you making us hit each other? Come on, man. We want to go on vacation.
Oh yeah. No, the players just think it's for their benefit. And the thing with it is I don't think it really is for their benefit. Maybe it helps long term to a degree with it, but it certainly doesn't put a better product on the football field. And you're right. But that's also why I say, is it not? It's a little more broader display, Carol. And then you're right. It is a league-wide problem in addition to that. But those two things should then inform you, if you're a team trying to build your defense up and the type of defense you want to run, how do I get my defense in less positions of having to tackle? Not that I can't, I'm always going to have to tackle defensively, right? I always am. But is there a way to schematically build a defense? Is there a way to set my defense up to put them in less of those situations rather than more of those situations like we are now? Can we get to the other side of the scale? Because we're on this side of the scale now. We're of the most teams that are put in the most situations of having to tackle, and those kind of we're probably the number one team, I'd gather, or one of the number one teams. How do you get yourself to the other side of that list? Because the tackling, like you said, you're not teaching it anytime soon. It's not going to be able to get fixed or remedied by that. The only remedy is remove the situations that they're put in to have to do it, if you can, if it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Andrix, hey, thank you for the $1.99. Realistically, what do we do with 5 and 20 in April? I think in order to get a really good idea of that, we're going to have to wait till after the combine. But I am kind of feeling a little trade down from 5, personally, just generally speaking. And getting a defensive lineman like either Murphy, Wilson, or Breeze, or Breezy, or Breezy. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the Clemson guy who has missed a lot of games, but is really, really talented.
Yes.
And at 20, I still kind of like the Trenton Simpson idea, but I don't know if he's going to be there. But that's what I would say right now.
Yeah, I think trading back for me is to the same thing, Adrian X. Trading back's really the ideal for me at that spot. Not really a fan of like the players I'm sitting looking at picking at 5 as it is. And yeah, Trenton Simpson's definitely a guy that certainly stands out to me at 20 that you'd look to take. Outside of him at 20, it's tough because there's not really any linemen. I will tell you that there's a thought process for me of wondering about maybe as an outside the box approach here, taking a guy like Paris Johnson of Ohio State, who's played guard his prior year, and busting him into guard at 20. And you're getting a guy now that maybe can give you, outstanding guard play out there. And he has an ability, if you have an injury at tackle, to kick out to tackle on top of it.
I'd have to think about that one. I mean, Paris Johnson, I keep seeing in like the top 5 of some of these mocks, or top 8. So if he's there 20. That's pretty phenomenal value, admittedly.
Yeah, and it's very possible he could be because there has been some other tackles that have gone back. There's some variants, but Peter Skoronsky. I've heard there's another guy that's jumped up there that I hear put over Johnson. So I've heard some varying levels of where he potentially goes. But that's also could be applied to another couple of these guys that are in this draft that might be in that position that you can move inside at the next level. That are guys that maybe, okay, not sure about him at left tackle, but man, he'd be a really good left guard. 20, I might be willing to make that kind of flyer if there's that guy to do that there, especially if the other options, the edge is a little bit lighter. Foskey's off the board at that point, right? No Jared Verse in this draft. You're going to be, pretty well into the depths of the edges at that point. I don't think you're going to have a prime guy there. I want to go receiver. You're going to have really the value there, Brendan, will be cornerback at 20. Like your highest rated guy is probably going to be a corner. And that's,
I don't think Pete would ever do that.
I don't think so either. I don't think so either. That's why I get kind of drawn into more of an outside the box look at it on a possibility there.
Okay. I mean, we're going to do a lot of shows about what we do at 5 and 20. We might do a whole show on 5, and then we might do another whole show on 20.
I imagine we will. Maybe a couple.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Well, we went a good 2 hours on that. Hey, it was a good season. It was a fun season. It was a productive season. Some cool stuff went down, but it's hard to remember all of that a few days after you have one of the worst defensive performances you've had since Pete Carroll got here. That's got to be on like the top 5 list. So I can't pretend like everything's just cool right now. It's not. But overall, nothing to be mad about this season, I don't think. Not really.
Nope. It's and me and you talk about some things that are tough stuff to talk about in this team, but we both do have that perspective where we stand at the end of this year, realizing and recognizing the fact that the future is very bright. We're going to be a better team next year. We have young guys that are going to be even more improved next year. This team's got a road ahead where it's kind of starting to get more to a downhill plane. We're going to start to ascend. And so, we definitely can see that. We just look at this, of course, through the lens of like, we want to see championships. We want to see it try to get back to conference championships. We want to see us up there with the cream of the crop, competing with the best of the best. That's what the sport's about. And so we do look at it from that, but we are on that road. The hard part of getting down that road, first and foremost, is to collect the talent. Yeah, you need the schematics and the coaches on, but first and foremost, you need the talent. The San Francisco taught us this last week. We're going to have the talent here. So at least that part will be fulfilled. We don't have to question that as we go forward into that. And that part is going to definitely help.
All right. So, Brandon, thank you for hanging out with me tonight. It's been a fun couple hours. Thank you to everybody in the chat. We were up over 300 people for a little bit there. We still got about 275. It's always a little bit of a sad time when your season comes to an end, but better days are coming. And believe me, the show goes on through the entire offseason. I know I'm going to be here. Pretty sure Brandon's going to be here the whole time to break every little thing down. We got free agency. We got the draft. We got little things within that. You've got, the combine. You've got legal tampering. You've got franchise tags. You've got all this stuff. And we're going to talk about it.
I do have, if I can drop a quick plug too, I've got a Will Anderson vid dropping in an hour. So,
okay. Who's your comp? Like Cortez Kennedy for Jalen?
Charles Haley.
Ooh. Wow. Okay, that's going way back. Cortez, basically the same era as Cortez, actually, so I like it.
Yeah, just a tiny hair of like he's right there at just as Cortez come in, he's kind of at the end. The tough part with Will Anderson is people go Von Miller, Derek Thomas, but it's not first step quickness, it's step 2, 3, 4 quickness with him. And so when you make the comp to Von Miller, Derek Thomas, I don't think it's apropos because of the fact that Anderson is quick. It's not that he's not, but that stuff that they had, and those guys were more dippy, bendy guys. He's not quite as dippy and bendy, but he's explosive and he can do some things. So he was a really fun player to watch, Brendan. He is absolutely with Carter. Those guys are your two separators defensively, looking through all the tape that I did kind of putting it together. But he's off the mark of being quite a Thomas Von Miller generational prospect type, but like Haley was, just a really fine player all the way through, a guy that just gives you it and gets there in kind of a variety of different ways. But yeah, I went back and watched some Haley tape and I was like, yeah, it's Haley.
Yeah. Some people have said Khalil Mack for Will Anderson as well for a more modern comp.
Yeah. Khalil's kind of a little more of the 6'2". He's kind of like stubbier built, but with that power that comes from it, where Anderson's like legit 6'4", and he feels like he's got the near 34-inch long arms. that are really long with it. And so he feels a little bit more like the size part with him. Khalil feels like he's always coming up underneath you with the leverage, where Anderson sometimes feels like he's coming down on you with the leverage on some of these guys and how he attacks them. And so it's what makes them unique a little bit from indifference. And he doesn't do like Khalil's got the long arm bull rush, where he locks the guy out and then runs him back. What he does is Anderson's got the stab and grab. And so the stab and grab starts out with a long arm to show. He doesn't really run long arm bull rush. He only does that to show the lineman. And then he grabs the lineman's wrist like this and lifts it up and gets the lineman. If you go, a lot of the highlights I got here on Anderson, he's doing this to the lineman, making him look like bully style, where he's just lifting their arms up and then he kind of flips his hips around him to get to the quarterback. But that's where Khalil was more just that pure power guy. This guy's, there's a little more, there is power elements to what he does, but it is more kind of quickness based. 20-pound difference between these two guys, probably too. Mac was 265 and, but impressive. Kid's impressive, Brendan. We'd love to have him. If he ends up in Arizona, he'll be a scary player there.
Oh, yeah. Andrix, hey, thank you for the $1.99. Not as sexy, but would you consider a Murphy video? I think that might be good because Murphy is a guy who didn't produce a lot in college, and I think that puts some people off him because he didn't put up the big numbers. In fact, you could say that about a couple people in this draft. Like, I don't think Jalen Carter has big numbers either.
No.
So I think those comp videos really help people like understand what the appeal is.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great suggestion. I've been thinking about which would be the next one on it. So I think Murphy's probably a good one because I want to pick ones that are potential likelihoods for our Hawks or potential guys that definitely our Hawks will be around on with that. So I like it, man. It's a great suggestion.
Okay, so anyway, we are going to go ahead and wrap up here. We're at about the 2-hour mark. I believe, I don't know exactly what our stream schedule is going to be now that we're here in the off season. We might take a little bit of time to let the playoffs play out first. Understand that people are going to be thinking about that more than the off season, but pretty quickly here, we're going to get into free agency stuff. So we will definitely be doing that in the near future. Can't wait to do it with you, Brandon. Next time we stream, it'll be on your channel.
Sounds good.
And to anybody in chat who might be interested, I plan on streaming on Twitch after this stream is over. Zelda Breath of the Wild, I plan on beating it tonight. So if you want to see that, head on over and we'll see if we can do it. Brandon, I will see you in the very near future. We've got a lot of free agency stuff to dive into. Can't wait to do it with you, man.
Me neither, brother. Me neither. Love it.
And look, man, the season's over. The team isn't everything we want it to be. The season wasn't everything we wanted it to be. There was definitely a time when our eyes got a little bigger and we were thinking about bigger and better things than what we got, perhaps. But you know what? This team found a way to the playoffs. This team found a way to a winning record in a year when a lot of people said 4 wins. A lot of people said 5 wins.
2.
Yeah, 2 wins. I had some people saying 1 win. I got receipts. I got the receipts, man.
You show them.
Yeah. So look, life is good. It could be better, but we're going to make it better going forward. We're going to figure out how to make it better going forward. And we're going to make sure something like what happened on Saturday afternoon never happens again. So in that spirit, we're going to have to hit you guys with it one more time.
One more time.
And then we're on to the off season. One more time. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.